Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance. Thank you. And tonight the invocation will be given by Holly Springer, Bishop Nick Olive from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Welcome.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for the opportunity that we have to gather here together as we consider the matters of our town. We thank Thee for all those that serve in our town, for the council members and our mayor, all of the staff, and those that spend their time ensuring that we have a wonderful place to live and raise our families. We thank Thee, Father, for this Christmas season, for the opportunity that we have to remember Thy Son and His sacrifice for us. And we ask Thee, as we come into contact with our friends and neighbors and family members, that we may be able to serve them, be able to enjoy the time that we have to spend together throughout this Christmas season. We thank Thee for these things, Father, and we ask this in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Bishop. Item number 4, adjustment approval, December 17th, 2019 meeting agenda, Mayor Pro Tem. Somehow, hello. There you go.
I'll move to adopt the December 17th, 2019 meeting agenda with no changes.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Fine. Number 5, public comment period. We'll open a public comment period. And remember, the purpose is to get public feedback, suggestions, and requests to the council. Do not expect council action during the comment period. Topics requiring additional information may be referred to the town manager or appropriate staff. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes. And if someone has already said what you were going to say, you can pass. At that point in time, thank you for your consideration. And I have no one signed up. Why did I say all that?
Important.
Yeah, it is. So we'll open and close the public hearing and go to something we've been waiting on since the snowfall in Boston. I forget who that was. Sherry Lee, yeah. We're going to recognize former council lady Sherry Lee, and if she will come forward, I will join her at the podium. Glad you made it back.
Yes. You did, Mayor.
All right, first of all, I'll tell you a little bit about this young lady. She was first elected in 2001 when the town was 25,838 exactly. You were what, 14, 15? Okay. On her watch, the town added about 13,000 new residents, and this reflects her interest in support of economic development. She served on the Parks and Recreation Committee and the Sug Farm Committee, and worked hard to bring the old and the new, big, small town, I like that, together. She was proud to work with the council on the development of this strategic plan that supports the place where people live. Committee assignments included grant applications, and as a substitute teacher, did y'all know that? Is an enthusiastic booster of Holly Springs schools and their teachers. She will be missed, and I mean that sincerely, and continued thoughts and prayers for her wonderful son. Okay? Congratulations, thank you for your service. And I have this all written up for you right here. And before you say anything, there's something else we want to do. Oh, here it is. Once again, we have spared no expense. And there's more than one. There's one. Let me show it to everybody. And number 2, I still have my old one. when I was a kid. Remember that?
I do.
And I think Linda has something else to give you. This is the big one. This is not the first ever time we've done this, but we're naming a street, I think it's going to be 55 in her name, and to put that up. Don't tell anybody I said that, okay?
Name the U-turns after me.
There it is. What do you think? That's- And now it's you.
As I just told the gentleman back here, all these young guys, my speech is only about 3 pages, so we should be good. All right. And I'm sorry, I am going to read this. I was supposed to do this a couple weeks ago, but I was stranded in Boston in the snow. Can't say I didn't mind that a little bit. Okay. Phew. Wow, it's really strange to be walking up this way after 8 years of coming in through the side there. But I ran for office because I wanted to make to be a part of something that would make our community a great place for many generations. I didn't run for power or prestige or recognition because being a leader is not about that. It's about taking care of others. And I ran to make a difference for all of you. And I hope I did that in some way. To those of you who were by my side through the good times and the bad, thank you. Especially those who a couple of years ago, when ugly politics caused me to lose focus, you brought me back to the reason that I ran in the first place, and you reminded me that we are stronger than that. And this is the tough one here. To the town staff, 8 years ago, you welcomed me into your world. Through mutual cooperation and collaboration, we did this. In a very quiet and gracious manner, you've been a source of motivation and inspiration. You continue to astound me with your depth of knowledge, your vision, and your understanding that has no equal. So thank you. To the new council, my wish for you is to enjoy the ride, because it is a crazy one.
All right.
I also wish for you that you treat your colleagues and your staff with respect and build the relationships required for continued success. I've come to realize that being a part of a community is more than just leading it. Fred Rogers tells a story of when he was a boy and would come across scary situations. His mother would say, "Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. So please be those helpers." Though you've had, and you may have stronger and wiser sit in this seat, you will never have someone as proud as I have been and be privileged of being a councilwoman in Holly Springs. As I leave the second most important job I have ever had, with the first being a wife and a mother, with a sense of pride and gratitude, I say thank you for being part of my journey.
Let's give her a standing applause. I will miss you.
Would her family please raise your hands? I think they're back there.
There they are.
Let's give them a hand too, please. Be safe and stay out of Boston. Agenda item 6B, recognition of 12U boys and the 14U boys all-star soccer teams. Chris Champion from Park and Rec Department. Here we go again.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council, for allowing us this opportunity. My name is Chris Champion. I'm here on behalf of the Parks and Recreation Department to recognize two groups of exceptional young men, our 12U and 14U boys all-star soccer teams. These teams competed in and won the recent SWAC state championship tournaments. This year's SWAC soccer tournaments were held over Thanksgiving weekend in Goldsboro. and featured all-star teams from departments across our state. These teams overcame great competition, bad weather, and multiple schedule changes to bring the championships back to Holly Springs. Let's give them a big round of applause. Before we recognize the players, I would like to take a moment to thank all of the players' parents that are here tonight. The commitment that you all make to your kids is truly exceptional. The little things like getting them to practice and games on time and buying new shin guards and cleats when they will inevitably outgrow the ones you just bought are what make you all great parents and great role models to these young boys. I would also like to sincerely thank all of the coaches involved with these two teams. All of our Parks and Recreation Department coaches are volunteers, meaning they don't receive payment of any kind for their time and effort. However, they willingly go above and beyond for the kids in this room. The two head coaches here tonight, Coach Jeremy Payne and Coach Adam Schwab, are definitely two of the best in the Holly Springs soccer program. These guys actually coach multiple teams in our leagues, which essentially doubles the time that they spend on a soccer field every season. I'm definitely not exaggerating when I say that Holly Springs could not have the successful sports programs that we do without folks like Coach Payne and Coach Schwab. So first up, I would like to recognize the 12U team.
How many people do they have in soccer this year, Chris?
This past season for soccer, we had over 950 kids sign up for fall soccer. And then I was also speaking with the mayor earlier, and he wanted us to brag that we'll actually be close to 1,000 kids signed up for our basketball programs this year. So we'd like to thank all of you for that.
There was a time you didn't have any people living in town. Hi, Mark.
All right, go.
We'll match him from the first. Let's see. Now we'll do this. I'm going to go right off these things. We're going to recognize Ashok Bummeyer. Come on up. See your picture. Donovan Shanklin. Grant Perry. James McCargo. Logan Beckstead. Matthew Hannigan. Noah Hoshkis. Preston Charwills. Ryan Schomburg. Zachary Schwab. My assistant coach, Coach Luke. And for those who aren't here, we have Coach Juan Drake, Coach Juan Carlos, his son, Zachariah Watson, Malachi Watson, and Ryan James, and myself. Thank you.
I'll stay right there because I have a feeling that there's a few parents here that might want to take some pictures. Am I correct? Be the first if it isn't. So please come forward. With anybody who wants to take pictures, come on down. And you guys kind of get closer, maybe. Do you need to get closer, Tamara? Pretty good? All right.
right, next up, we have the 14U boys.
Thank you. Yeah, right? Seems like yesterday, huh? All right, how's everyone doing tonight? I am Coach Jeremy Payne, and these are the 14U Holly Springs All-Stars. What a bunch of savages. We're missing a bunch of people tonight, so we'll honor them as well. But want to thank the town council and mayor and athletics department for recognizing all these guys, all their hard work. My niece Nikki was also the assistant coach, so she's in Nashville right now, but want to give her a shout out. And I guess I'll give you a quick breakdown. We only got to play 2.5 games in this tournament, basically due to terrible weather conditions, and they gave it all they got. Our championship game was shortened. Overall, we finished up 21-1, and so a 20 goal differential. Pretty amazing. So if you want to give them a quick hand for that. But extremely proud of them. Look forward to coming back next year. So we'll go ahead and kick it off. Andrew Beavers. Andrew Beavers. Yep. Brady Frank. Brendan Kavanaugh. Caden Payne, my son. He's getting his tonsils taken out tomorrow, so feel for him. Devin LaFontaine. Jackson Breslin. Everybody is Matthew up here. Noah Clark. Patrick Alvarado. Sean Garrison. Will Grush. Jackson Strieger. And I believe that's everyone. Picture time. Oh, let's honor these who were not here. Elliot Dewey. Ryan Young. Matthew Utica. Ian Chalfant. Kaylin Edwards. Jordan Prince. Joe Ward. Jason May. And last but not least, Brian Cox. Thank you, everyone.
All right, same story. Those with cameras or phones or Hawkeyes, Brownie Hawkeyes, come forward.
Did they? Okay. Yeah. I had copies. Did the client.
Okay, getting ready to go down to business.
Yep.
Wait for just a second. Okay. At this point in time, we'll go to agenda item 7A, annual report from an independent auditor. And I'm going to introduce Mary Hogan from Finance Director, who's going to introduce. You're on, Mary.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Mary Hogan, the Finance Director for the Town of Holly Springs. As you're probably aware, we are required annually to have our books audited by an independent auditor. Our current audit firm that we employ is Elliott Davis. We have Tom McNeese here. He's the managing partner who will be giving our report. So.
Thank you, Mary. Mr. Mayor, Councilman. Want to start off by thanking Ms. Hogan and her team. As you know, the audit process is comprehensive and takes a lot of time. We ask them for a lot of information, and as we do that, the analysis of that information and the back and forth to make sure that the financial statements are stated fairly it can be an arduous process. So we definitely thank the team for all their hard work helping us to get through the process. I'm just going to make a few brief comments about the overall audit and how that process went. I'm going to start off with just some very high-level analytics in terms of the general fund and just kind of talk about how you ended up as far as financial performance in the general fund. As you know, driven by a lot of growth, revenues of $45 million exceeded your budget by about $5.8 million and exceeded the prior year by 18%. So that's very strong as reflected by the growth, particularly in permits and fees. On the expenditure side, expenditures of about $37 million exceeded the prior year by about $1.3 million, but they were below budget. So within budget by about $3.2 million, or about within 4% of the actual amount. So that puts you in a position where fund balance in the general fund increased by about $8.2 million. Last year was about $2.6 million, so that's a pretty healthy swing, again, driven by those growing revenues and expenditures staying within budget. So after transfers between funds, the general fund balance increased by about $2.6 million. For where you ended up in fund balance, usually you want to have, according to the Government Financial Officers Association, they recommend approximately 2 months of expenditures in your available fund balance. So in other words, essentially if you take the expenditures that y'all have, divide those by 12, and then they recommend that you have a reserve in unassigned fund balance of about 2 months. Now that's not a one-size-fits-all. For example, we have clients that we work with, coastal counties and cities. We want them to have a higher reserve in the event of a weather event, a hurricane, and they're subject to a waiting period for FEMA funds. So just to give an example, that is a general rule, but you're in good shape in using that as a criteria. So you have about 3.5 months, a little over 3.5 months of expenditures in your unassigned fund balance, and that's actually up from about 2.5 in the prior year. So just a good change, again, a good swing in the fund balance performance. Did want to cover a couple required communications, talk about the audit reports real quick, and then findings and recommendations. So as we go through, as we report to y'all as the governing board, some of the required communications that we want to reference. So first of all, our responsibility. You have us come in as the auditors to evaluate the financial statements, the comprehensive annual financial report, and give an opinion as to whether this is fairly stated in all material respects in accordance with the accounting rules or generally accepted accounting principles. So why is that important? Basically, you've got, as you know, you have creditors, you have granting agencies, the state, that need information that they can rely on, that it's accurate and that it's fairly stated. So what they're looking for, and the reason the statute requires that the audit be performed, is that they can look at the financial statements and be comfortable that they're presented in accordance with those generally accepted accounting principles and that they're fairly accurate, so that they can make a credit decision, they can make a grant decision. So we do a lot of planning before we come in and start to ask your finance team for information. Essentially, every year we want to do a fresh risk assessment. We want to look at your internal controls, see where those controls are strong. If they're not strong in a certain area, that's going to present a risk for us, and we're going to concentrate more of our audit time in those areas where internal controls may not be as strong. We do employ a materiality threshold, so in other words, we don't look at 100% of the transactions that occur during the fiscal year or at 100% of what makes up the year-end balances. If we did that, we would never finish the audit process, and remember, we're looking for that material misstatement, so that's why, from a practical measure, we want to employ that threshold. We look at your accounting policies to see if they're consistent with other local governments, with those generally accepted accounting principles. Do they make sense? And most of those are disclosed in all the footnotes that are in the comprehensive report, and they're there to support those numbers, to give them context and perspective. So we want to look at those to make sure those are reasonable and they're of value to the user of the financials. Throughout the process, we have discussions and exchanges with management. Those are going to be critical in nature from both sides. So if we're looking at something, we're always going to want to get management's context, perspective on it. We have to make our own decision as to whether it's an accurate presentation or not, but we always have that input. I think that was a good, healthy exchange with your finance team. If it wasn't, if we had any difficulties or encountered areas where we weren't getting the information that we needed or that information wasn't accurate, we would be required to come to you as the board and resolve that, but we didn't have any kind of difficulty of that kind. Our audit reports, we essentially issue 3 audit reports. The first one I mentioned, as our primary responsibility, we provide that opinion as to whether the financial statements are fairly stated. Secondly, we issue what is called a government auditing standards report or a yellow book report. As a local government, you're subject to that added layer of audit standards. And really what we're looking for there are, again, going back to those internal controls, and are those in good shape to where we've got a sufficiently reduced risk that there isn't misstatement in the financial statements. We also want to make sure there's good controls over compliance measures. So as we'll see a second with the single audit report, you know, there's a set of internal controls that we want any local government to have to make sure that they are in compliance with statutes, regs, contracts, laws, things that you're going to be subject to. And so Yellow Book requires that we look at those instances and issues. The single audit. This is actually a separate audit process, and what we're doing is, again, we're giving an opinion as to whether the town is in compliance, materially in compliance with all the requirements that come along with their grants. Now, the town had expenditures of about $2.8 million in state and federal grants. Those are good funds to have to help you with your growth, to help you meet your mission and provide services, build your infrastructure. But those funds do come with compliance requirements attached. So what we're charged with doing, what you've engaged us to do, is to perform audit procedures so that we can give that opinion as to whether you are substantially in compliance with those requirements. If not, the risk is that funds would have to be returned to the granting agency. Didn't have any kind of a situation like that. In fact, we were able to issue an opinion for both the state and federal level that the town was substantially in compliance with those requirements. That's an unmodified or clean opinion, and that's like with the financial statement opinion, that's where you want to be. We always have findings and recommendations. Those are included in your report. I think the main thing we're looking for with those findings and recommendations is that the town has a corrective action plan, that they're addressing those items. We feel comfortable that that is a priority. Again, if that was not the case, then we would look at that as a risk, and it would be something that we would be required to communicate. But our experience with you in our second year doing the audit is that y'all are reactive in terms of addressing those issues. So, Mr. Mayor, that concludes my overall summary, and I'd be glad to take any questions from the council.
Any comments or questions? See none?
No.
We're all good. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the
Thank
time
you.
this evening.
Thanks.
Agenda item 7B, Holly Springs Annual Crime Report Presentation. Captain Jay Bruner.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
if I could, while Captain Bruner's on his way up, just a couple of introductory remarks. Just to set the stage a little bit. When I first came on board, one of the first conversations I had with Chief Herring, we were talking about what are the core components that makes for a great police department. And there were three that we discussed. And one was around a police department that has a community-oriented policing philosophy, which we do. And that means proactive policing, and it means a high level of community engagement to help us fight crime and build relationships with neighborhoods and the community. The second area that we talked about was being a data-driven organization in terms of helping identifying or using data to help us identify, find, and track crime, and therefore help us be able to attack it even more effectively. And the third piece, which is the piece you're going to hear about a little bit tonight, is around transparency. And with that we're transparent with the community in terms of where we are with our crime statistics, the highs and the lows, and being very transparent about that. I think what you're going to hear tonight, we have some really strong, positive statistics. A lot of that is due to the great work that Captain Bruner and the entire police department and the chief do. And we want to highlight those tonight and share a little bit of perspective and some context on those. So with that, let me turn it over to Captain Jay Bruner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Town Council, all the town colleagues for having us
Thank you,
here.
Cap.
It's an amazing opportunity to be able to come here and give you such good news about the status of your town, its crime rate, its crime trends. Welcome to the newest council members. Appreciate you guys raising your hand and electing to serve. It's an amazing thing. It's a very courageous thing. We look forward to your leadership, your guidance through your term. Throughout the past few years, as the manager has stated, the police department has been working to establish a mechanism to bring the citizens and the council an annual report containing crime data, crime trends, strategic initiatives that we're undertaking at the department, and pretty much everything else that concerns your police department. This is all done, as the manager stated, pursuing transparency and accountability, and to continue to build community partnerships. We are only allowed to be the police because you allow us to do so. Without the community engagement, without your engagement, without your support, we would not be able to accomplish our goals. I'd like to start by kind of giving you an insight into our mission statement as a police department. We, the Holly Springs Police Department, working in partnership with the citizens of Holly Springs, whose trust, confidence, and support are paramount in achieving the highest quality of life, are committed to providing professional, ethical, and impartial policing practices as we preserve life, protect property, and maintain order for all who live, work, learn, and visit in our community. Currently, this is what your department looks like. We have 86 full-time employees. Those personnel are divided into two major divisions. One is field operations, and the other is the support services division. There's 69 sworn full-time officers that have power of arrest. There are 10 sworn auxiliary officers. Those are people that from time to time are tasked with things to help out with parades or to come in for Hollyfest and help us work. There's 17 non-sworn full-time personnel. That includes 2 animal control officers and a slew of telecommunicators who are phenomenal. we are able to boast that we are one of a very few number of primary PSAPs in the state. We have 3 non-sworn part-time personnel that act in various forms as far as administrative assistants and evidence technicians, and then one volunteer chaplain, which we just instituted this year. Kind of an agency profile professional standing, we're able to boast that 49% of our personnel possess the highest law enforcement certification possible in the state of North Carolina. 5 of us have masters, 48 have bachelor's degrees, 9 have associate's degrees. We have 20 veterans on staff, and the average years in service that we have out there on the road serving our citizens is 11.1 years in professional service. This is how we posture ourselves. These are the Holly Springs service zones. As you guys continue to promote growth and development throughout the town, we're constantly reevaluating this and changing it dependent upon population density and specific areas of interest like the Village District and the downtown development. We want to make sure that we're able to get the proper response times as low as possible for our citizens when they call us, and whether that be for a vehicle unlock because somebody locked their keys in their car, or if it happens to be an emergency situation, we want to ensure that we have somebody there quickly. What is assisting us in this dispatch now is something called automated vehicle location services. So all of our telecommunicators are able to look at a map and dispatch the closest unit in real-time GPS. Now the meat and potatoes of it. Great news is that it's no secret we're the safest town in North Carolina. But here it is by the numbers. This is a national average per 1,000 citizens compared to Holly Springs per 1,000 citizens. Overall violent crime in the United States is measured by the UCR, the Uniform Crime Report, or by NIBRS, which is the National Incident-Based Reporting System. 18,000 police departments throughout the nation, to include ours, submit statistics up to the federal government. For fair comparisons on crime rates, the FBI breaks groups of cities down by population. We happen to be a Group 4 city, as we currently fall between 25,000 and 50,000 residents. Crime is currently reported as either violent crime, murder, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault are the major categories that they look at, or property crime, which is burglary, larceny, or motor vehicle theft. Additionally, other crimes are individually monitored and reported on as all other crimes offenses under the current way that they measure this stuff. So as you can see, at 0.66 occurrences per 1,000 people, we're well below the national average. Compared to North Carolina, we're well below North Carolina. The average violent crime rate per 1,000 is 3.7 crimes per 1,000 individuals. Our property crime data shows that we are well below the national average there at 2.57 property crimes in the nation per 1,000 and 0.025 here in Holly Springs. North Carolina, a similar tale there, 2.49 and 0.025. Over the course of our growth the past 5 years, it was important, we felt, to show you the trends as they exist. These are the 4 violent crime categories that we just talked about and the 3 property crime categories that we just talked about. And on the whole, we're either staying flat at an extremely low rate or we're consistently descending in the values associated with the instances that we see here in Holly Springs. And that's as our population has continued to grow. We've expanded in our business areas, in our commercial district. Our industrial park is growing. This is a rare circumstance. It's not something that generally happens. The largest decline that we've seen thus far has been in burglaries. I can attribute a lot of that to the way that we're arraying our police officers, our data-driven deployment of our resources out into the community, and our phenomenal response times. All other crimes, we decided that it would be best to pick things that we get questions about the most, that we could go through a whole slew of other types of crimes, most of which do not even occur in our town and don't really pertain to what we experience in our community, but we wanted to make sure that we were showing you the ones that we get the most questions about. You can see there our drug crime is trending downward, vandalism trending downward, weapons offenses, DWIs, stolen property offenses, and disorderly conduct are staying relatively flat. The one outlier there is the fraud, and the unfortunate thing about fraud is that it's perpetrated generally from outside of our jurisdiction via electronic mechanisms or the fabled Nigerian prince who told you won the lottery when you've never been to Africa, that kind of thing. All of those are collectively investigated generally by a federal agency. FBI compiles those, does those. Again, largest decline is in drugs and DWI crimes. Very well positioned in the town between our traffic team and our narcotics detectives that when they receive complaints, when they receive any kind of intelligence, they're out there trying to intercede upon them. And it's great to know that Uber's working for people. Uber's done a lot to stop the incidents of DWI. We wanted to get into our traffic stop information for you, as it's another major part of what we do. This is a breakdown of 5,143 total stops between November 2018 and November 2019. The vast majority are due to things like speeding, equipment violations, and regulatory violations. Here's just kind of a breakdown of totals for you to give you an indication of how many we're doing in each one of those areas. But what's more interesting to me, and it really speaks to our buy-in to your strategic goals of being a safe and friendly community, is that when we are doing these traffic campaigns, the vast majority of what we're doing is warning people. We feel as an agency that the philosophy of trying to educate people before we penalize people is extremely important. So for instance, we'll receive a traffic complaint in the neighborhood, and we make every effort to go out there and make meaningful contacts at the window with people to try to educate them on why they might want to slow down as they're going through the neighborhood, where schools are at in relation to where they're speeding along our roads and highways. Eventually, we move into a more enforcement-driven dynamic once we feel that we have tried to saturate as best as possible with education efforts. What's important to remember, though, is that every stop in and of itself is an enforcement action. A lot of people think that it's only a ticket in someone's hand as an enforcement action. We believe that we can have so much more impact and build a lot of social capital and rapport if we make that effort for community engagement at the window. Community outreach and engagement is the philosophical core of what we're doing these days. It's everything that your police department does. Every mission that we have, submission within our department, is driven towards finding a way to feed it back in to that community outreach philosophy. Every officer is expected to be an ambassador within the community, and they're encouraged to form first-name relationships with every citizen that they encounter. We want their interactions with the public that we serve to transcend the typical police-citizen dynamic. Along with these expectations, your department can be found throughout the community, a total of 429 times between November of last year and this year, at different formal programs, and this is just a list of a few highlights that jump out. Council members and other town entities have come and participated with us, which we truly appreciate. This year, new to what we're doing in our outreach efforts is the Citizens Well Check program. Some of you may have heard of it. It's a wonderful program. It's a callback for elderly citizens who may not have other family that are able to check on them daily. They receive a call, and if we don't receive an answer, then we go out and physically check on their well-being. We've added an element to this. We've started bringing cards with us, because some of these folks are invalids. Some of them are not able to get out. Some of them don't have a whole lot of human interaction, and something as simple as a Hallmark card across the threshold of their door can brighten somebody's day. Holly Springs Police Explorer Post was established this year. We have 8 individuals that are involved right now. If you're not familiar with Police Explorers, It's kind of an in-between step between our youth academy and other programs for kids that are in their 18 to 21-year-old range. What we're seeking to do is generate interest in wanting to be the police and exposing kids to the real philosophy of policing, which is being among the people, learning how to function as a police officer from a community outreach standpoint. These guys and girls also compete every year in an Explorers Roundup. This year it was held in Mecklenburg County, and it's all hosted through the Boy Scouts of America, but they go and compete on various aspects of what they've learned at their troop, as far as how to conduct traffic stops and those kinds of things, and come up with community programs. On top of that, we're continually supported by having SROs in every school, countless canine demos, civic group presentations, bike safe instruction, business and security audits and presentations. Those have skyrocketed. We're doing a lot of those now. HOA meeting attendances and many, 429 to be exact, other COP outreach initiatives. These are just some photos. I didn't want to kill you with photos tonight of all sorts of different things that our officers are out there doing. And our business community has supported us. You guys have supported us. Our citizens, we receive just tremendous feedback from the amount of outreach that we do. There's the Explorers post down there on the left. So Holly Springs, like I said, it was no secret they were ranked the safest city in North Carolina. Neighborhood Scout ranked us as 51st state, our safest city in the country. And you know, kind of shock yourself to think, well, why is that? Why are we like that when our peer municipalities around us don't get that same accolade? And I believe that it boils down to just a few things. And one is that our department believes in relentless engagement with our community stakeholders, and we seek to celebrate diversity in all of its forms and to be inclusive of all perspectives as we attempt to provide justice services. Our core philosophy, as I've stated, is community outreach and connection, and we promote it with every aspect of our mission. We recruit for what we call fitness. And fitness, yes, physical fitness is important, and that's a very big element of what we do. But we want them to fit in this community. We seek innovative, collaborative problem solvers who are truly passionate about service and teamwork and building community partnerships. We hold ourselves to an extremely high standard of service, integrity, and accountability, and we respect the trust that you guys and the rest of the citizens place in us, and we refuse to let that be compromised. We also strive to implement a whole Holly Springs approach to how we provide service to our citizens. Sometimes the police department is not the best answer for a particular citizen's problem. Meaningful partnerships within various town departments allow us to be able to not just say you need to call Public Works. It's let me get you in contact with somebody from Public Works, and we try to make that phone call on our own there with the citizen. And we believe that leads to lasting and sustainable solutions for people, rather than just throwing information at them and moving on. We endeavor for perfection in everything that we do, and we will only accept excellence as an outcome. And most of all, the council, the new council, the council before, throughout the last year, has been amazing at the support and priority that you put over our mission. The teamwork with the various town departments has been just unbelievable. And I'd like to give that to you guys, that without your support, we would not be able to do this. This is our motto, and it's on every challenge coin that we have. And it's one department, one community, and one family. Thank you.
Super.
Do you have any questions?
Questions or comments for the captain? I'm sure there might be a few.
This is great. And you know, and people come here and they talk about the safety and the community, so thank you for doing that. the biggest amount of calls I get are around pedestrian safety and speeding. So I'd be curious, not now, but at some point, is speeding getting better over time? Or like, I know that you're educating, and I hear it a lot from the older community downtown. So that's the only thing is made me think about, are we getting better?
Yeah, so I would recognize that, we definitely recognize that pedestrian safety, especially with the expansion downtown and around the schools, and speed complaints are a very major source of the feedback that we're getting from the community. And each one of those, we make sure that we attach resources to it. And even if that's, let's go out and complete a speed study in the neighborhood, let's determine if there is a problem. And once we have that data that, yes, there is a problem, we attach resources to it to go out there and conduct a campaign. The same thing goes for pedestrian safety. We've kind of really drilled it into our line personnel. If you see it, if you see somebody attempting to cross and someone doesn't stop, at minimum, try and make contact with that person, that motorist. They may not know, though it's beautiful signs and strobes and all kinds of things going on. They may not have even recognized it. So yes, I mean, we try to be very responsive to those complaints.
Results.
Are there any trends that you guys are seeing as far as distracted driving or for accidents as a contributing factor to this?
So yeah, it depends on where you're talking about. If it's out on the bypass, it's a big area for transient population moving between southern Wake County back into RTP and all that. So yes, I mean, we've seen an increase in traffic. We're going to see an increase in accidents. Distracted driving, I would say probably most accidents involve some level of inattention to what is going on. I mean, speed is another major contributing factor, but with the bypass, the way it has been constructed with all the turnaround lanes and the volume of traffic on there during heavy times, speed really isn't an issue because people aren't able to get up to a fast enough speed to make it so that they can't make decisions and have that reaction time. Within town, we'll get calls for mailboxes hit, probably because somebody was texting. There are those occasional types of things. I think as technology becomes more saturated into the driving experience for the average motorist, we're going to continue to see these problems happen until they perfect a self-driving car, at which point, But yes, I guess would be the answer for that.
Other comments, questions?
Just a thank you to you and your team's captain. The professionalism, dedication, and commitment of all of our law enforcement officers are why we're the safest town in North Carolina and why we're an attractive and desirable place to live. So thank you for what you and your teams do each and every day to help us stay that way.
Absolutely. And just to say, this is not a creation of mine. This is a collective creation between administration, between public relations, between IT to help me go in and dig out the statistics. It really has been a true team effort, and I appreciate every bit of support from everybody.
Let me just add on to what Councilman Barry said by saying thank you. One, for coming and giving us this wonderful presentation, but also what your entire department does every day. Luckily, my family, the most contact we've had with the police department has been through my daughter in a good way. She's only 8, but she probably talks about Officer 2, her safety resource officer, more than her teachers. So
he is a magnificent individual and a great example of our SRO program.
Yeah, so definitely tell him kudos that Ella Wolf said that he's doing a great job.
Yes, sir.
The Citizen Well Check program was a Wake County program that was dropped by them and picked up locally, correct?
Yes, sir. I don't pretend to know why they made that decision. I don't know that I should speak to it here, but it's something that we had seen and said, well, why are we not doing that?
Yeah.
It seems like such an easy thing to do.
Have you noticed any drop-off in participation among Holly Springs residents, or has anybody even looked at that, about whether you've had new citizens becoming engaged with the program, or loss of residents who it was working for through Wake County that the switch hasn't been seamless for?
So the program itself, Wake County only served population within their jurisdiction. So once it crossed the lines into Holly Springs, they were not servicing our our citizens with that. So for us, it's been an expansion in the program because it's new and we're recruiting people into it. As far as the county folks, I really couldn't speak to that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Kind of in summary, I think I'm so proud of both the fire and the police department here and our staff, but also our citizens. And and I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of times we forget to thank the citizens who are unafraid to call 911 or 557-9111. And in my travels around the county and work with the other mayors, I'm always very proud to say we're the safest town to live in North Carolina. And we have the best SRO program in the state of North Carolina. I mean that. I think we do. And I'm not sure I know of any other town or city that has an SRO in every school. Do you know of any? I don't think so.
I don't, and if it is, it's extremely rare. But I think we
yeah.
may be the only one. with all
So again, I'm just proud to be a part of Holly Springs and part of all the things that go on here. And if you're not a safe town, what are you? Think about it. And we compliment you, the police department and the fire department, for all that, and the citizens. Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Agenda item 8A, public hearing, rezoning 19, REZ03 Village Gate. Melissa Sigmund, Planning and Zoning, and Rachel Jones, Engineering.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Hi there.
So the item before you, the purpose of this this evening's item is to conduct a legislative public hearing to consider a zoning map change for approximately 19 acres of property. We'll get into the specific locations. The requested actions are to adopt the plan consistency statement and to adopt the rezoning ordinance to approve the rezoning from R20 residential and to CBCU community commercial with conditions as offered by the petitioner. So to orient you to this property is located to the west of GB Alford, and we'll get into the specifics because there are multiple lots involved. As you can see on the map, the properties are located to the north of Ralph Stevens Road, straddling Main Street. There are a number of parcels within the larger project area, totaling 19.3 acres. And again, the zoning of the properties currently ranges from R20 residential and community business. The proposal is for all of the property to be united under the CBCU zoning district so that all of the properties would have the same voluntary conditions attached to them. We will briefly get into kind of the gist of these conditions and can certainly further discuss any specifics at the council's interest. So this map has been provided by the applicant to identify certain areas of the property with different characteristics. The general topics of the conditions offered by the applicant do vary, ranging from essentially the manner in which the property would be developed under the mixed-use development option, which would contain both residential and non-residential uses, age restriction on Tract 1 that you saw on the north portion of the property, workforce housing on Tract 3 to the southeast of the property, dedication of all right-of-ways, construction of the streets, agreement to standard fees on Tract 2, providing professional office uses only, Tract 1 and 3, providing parking consistent with our design standards to be behind the building facades, providing mixed use on Tract 2, ground floor commercial on Tract 3, a maximum height of 75 feet, provision of 2,000 linear feet of off-street or off-site greenway trail, so not part of the project area itself, but additional greenway trail, as well as a 6,000 square foot urban art park on Tract 3. So those are just the general topics. There are a number of conditions, but these are just to highlight some of those areas that the applicant is volunteering. Again, for the vicinity map, just to orient you to the site, this property is located south of the South Park Village or Harris Teeter Shopping Center on the western portion of the site. It does bookend the existing Hampton Inns Hotel, kind of on the west side, and then it is south of the Walmart Shopping Center on the eastern portion of the property. The existing zoning of the site, as was mentioned, is primarily the R20 residential district, although there is a small portion that already has the CB commercial zoning. As you can tell, those large shopping centers are all already have the CB commercial zoning district. There is some property to the west of the project area that is residentially zoned. You may recognize the recently approved area for the Stevens Tract townhome development that is located in the orange colors with the RMF 15 and the RMF 8 located to the west of this site. But predominantly you see that the majority of the zoning adjacent to the project is the CB Community Business District. Our future land use map has the entirety of the project and the larger surrounding area designated for mixed use center. These are areas that are suitable for higher intensity commercial uses and are intended to take advantage of the large traffic draws of the adjacent transportation resources of things such as the GP Alford. So really maximizing and putting our more intense commercial areas adjacent to those transportation corridors. And with that, I can take any questions you may have for planning. Otherwise, we have engineering for some information regarding the utilities and other infrastructure.
Any questions so far? Looking good. Rachel Jones, Engineering.
Good evening, Rachel Jones with Engineering. So just to reorient you, Melissa did a great job of that, but to the right on the slide shows our approved water and sewer map and the properties that are on the petition for rezoning in relation to existing water main along South Main Street and existing sewer main for connection of utilities. So any project on the subject properties within the rezoning request are required to extend and connect to municipal water and sewer infrastructure. There is a sewer study that we are aware that will be needed with development, and the developer is responsible for mitigating their impact. Additional utility studies or any special studies related to engineering would be identified and determined at the time of development. So the map to the right is an overview of the radius of influence for transportation impact analysis that was studied. There were 11 intersections that were studied as shown, the green circles with a black dot in the center, and 5 proposed site driveways, the green circle with the cross or T in the center. And a traffic impact analysis was completed and finalized with the rezoning as required by the town and NCDOT. So to give you a bird's eye view of the location, the red dots here indicate the proposed site drives along South Main Street and Ralph Stevens Road, and a potential cross-access and secondary access for the rezoning properties. In this area, we have the Stevens Tract Townhome project that has been approved, and this triangular piece that potentially will have cross-access, as well as on the southern side of Ralph Stevens Road and the western side of Piney Grove Wilburn are the Southern Crossroads master plan properties. So just to highlight a couple of the more significant improvements that were identified in the traffic impact analysis, the developer is responsible for paying a fee in lieu of constructing third lane improvements on the bypass proportionate to the project impact in the amount of $105,000, in addition to some signal timing modifications that are needed at the intersection. On the southern side, there is a through right turn lane expected to be needed with development northbound from Piney Grove Wilburn onto Ralph Stevens Road, in addition to signal and timing modifications at that intersection as well. And as Melissa mentioned, the developer has agreed or committed to constructing greenway along Piney Grove Wilburn Road. Are there any questions for engineering at this time?
Engineering questions?
Yes. Firstly, on the traffic piece, when we put the light up at Piney Grove, Wilburn, and Ralph Stevens, it was one of those ones where we tried to get it in there quickly to alleviate some of the traffic issues we had there. And they were erected with those wooden poles. is there any requirement or, update to those more metal type decorative poles that we typically see throughout town with a project like this that would increase the appearance and people driving through there?
That could certainly be something that's discussed. At this time, the TIA indicates the traffic timing modifications that would be required at that intersection. We have the Village Gate rezoning project, as well as two other projects that are in the review process that have impacts at this intersection. One we've collected or are anticipating to collect a fee in lieu for those improvements. We have Logging Road rezoning that's in the process that will also be paying a fee in lieu towards improvements at that intersection. So I think that's a reasonable ask now that that is our standard requirement for the intersection.
Okay. Secondly, on engineering, if we could go back to the sewer for a minute, my understanding is that these parcels would flow to the Bass Lake pump station. And where are we at capacity-wise with that pump station, and what kind of town improvements are going to be needed in order to allow the capacity necessary to support this development?
So there is a portion of the properties that are in the rezoning petition that are shown today in our sewer basin map to go to Holly Springs Bayville Creek Pump Station. And that's something that the developer will evaluate at the time of development and the downstream sewer evaluation. The majority of the property does flow to the Bass Lake Pump Station and is in that basin, which, we are aware of downstream areas of concern where there are segments of pipe that are over 50% full today, which is our standard. So during the development plan review process, the downstream sewer evaluation would evaluate the basin, if they're, Bass Lake Sewer Basin and the Holly Springs Bayville Creek Pump Station Basin as well. So they would look at their impact from the project as well as the future build out of each basin to see what remaining capacity is there for the properties that are still undeveloped and what is needed to mitigate that impact.
So that sewer study is typically done at development plan rather than a rezoning? Is
Correct.
that how we typically see it?
That's correct.
Other questions?
If we do require additional development for that, where are we at as far as collecting fees in lieu to get to the next level of development for that sewer line?
So we would anticipate a developer agreement to start that conversation. Once the sewer study, or prior to the sewer study being completed, just getting that discussion started. And then as we identify improvements that might be needed to mitigate the impact of this project, that would be either a fee in lieu or construction of those improvements would be required of the developer.
In your professional opinion, is there any way the existing sewer line at Bass Lake can accommodate this project as is today, or would that automatically necessitate improvements to the sewer line?
We would have to look at some hard data. I mean, we know that there's one line that's over 50% full today, but the previous study that we had was completed by the Stevens Tract Townhome Project, and it was, I think, about 54 or 55% full. So it wasn't on the extreme end, but it's something that we continue to monitor. And there are other segments downstream that we know, we would like to continue to monitor through the development stages that are coming through and plan for improvements and upgrades. So without having a study submitted in the review process and having that model output and data to evaluate, and I couldn't say today what might, there could be pump station upgrades required. There could be parallel lines that are needed for gravity sewer to get there. So those are some of the potential improvements that we might expect with this.
And our normal tool for capturing all of that in like a funding plan is typically done through a developer agreement, correct?
Correct.
And is it the same way with traffic where they pay the proportionate fee to their impact for sewer improvements, or is there, I guess, the developer agreement would dictate what that funding arrangement would look like?
That's right. So it could either mean a fee in lieu or construction of a specific improvement that might be needed.
Okay.
Rachel, is there a basic planning factor difference between whether it's commercial square footage or residential? Do you have a general understanding of, what the impact is if it's higher density residential versus commercial? Which one is a greater drain, if you will, on the sewage?
Right, there are the sewage generation rates that we use, the state rule, and that's what would be used in the study to show the anticipated use for each development plan that would come through. and
Yeah,
what
I'm
we're
just asking in
anticipating.
general, is it per square foot? Is it more per square foot of commercial or per square foot of residential?
Right, commercial is generally per square footage. Sometimes you have like an employee-based or, for residential, it would be per resident or per person.
Okay. But no real good way to gauge which one would be more intensive
Residential
on the
typically
sewage?
residential typically has a higher usage.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
That's what I was looking for.
Okay.
Thanks.
Rachel, with all of the schools in that area, I know when there's an evacuation plan from Harris, the nuclear plant, is it on any of those routes? Because I know the schools would be emptied and sent to another school further down. Do you look at that when you're looking at the traffic in that area? Or-
That's not a typical requirement of our
Okay.
TIA scoping process, but I think their transportation engineer is present tonight and might be able to speak more to how that might be considered in the analysis.
Is it on the Sharon Harris evacuation routes at all from the schools? Do you know?
From years past and the exercises that we've participated in, and when waiters have come and talked, Agent Barry, our chief was there, but Agent Barry was, and getting them to the school that's in Raleigh, I think was the first stop. I'm not sure if South Main Street is on that or not.
Okay, since South Main has been expanded, I didn't know whether that was something that was considered. Okay.
Something we can look into for you.
That'd be great, yeah.
Okay.
There's no longer a roundabout considered at that intersection. I didn't hear that when you went through the improvements.
There is not, that's correct.
And one more question, I guess it's half engineering, half parks, but the greenway condition that's been put into the packet, how do we evaluate from a staff perspective where that goes and what it looks like? I guess there's a lot of language in there about waiting till the development plan, but for me, at the rezoning stage to offer a condition like that, I think it's pretty important to lock in what we're gonna get through a conditional use rezoning permit. And as it's depicted on some of the plans that have been preliminarily submitted, that greenway starts at the intersection and ends in the middle of nowhere, right before a wetland. Doesn't add a lot of value to people that are out there. So how do we go about making that more valuable? There's a stub in a neighborhood that's not very far, maybe within 500 feet of where that greenway is ending on that proposed plan. That connection would provide connectivity and walkability to 800 houses that are over there. So seeing that it just kind of stops in the middle of, nowhere, it's a concern that, we're adding this connectivity benefit, but it's not really benefiting much of anybody going through some ETJ land and then stopping.
And I think I would defer that to Leanne so
Okay.
that she could speak
Sure.
to the conversations that have been had as of late.
I think you raise a good question. We have had conversations around trying to get that additional extension. Part of our lack of a true commitment is we're still waiting for some additional adjacent development on that property to see where our ultimate connections are going to be. As you know, we'll be updating the Greenways master plan as well and making sure that, again, we're getting those regional connections that are important. But that 500-foot difference, if you will, from the connection from the termination to the residential is a challenge for us, and we're going to continue to try to work through to try to come to some resolution to make that happen.
The probability of a development plan prior to our master plan being completed is, it's 50-50, right? So we may not have our plan by the time development plan comes back and we have to evaluate what that greenway looks like. That's a tough sell for me. And I'll tell the applicant the same thing when they get up here, but I'm just trying to understand from a staff perspective what we're going for there. And if that's, has that location been solidified for this proposal? And there's, with that zoning condition, there's no opportunity that's going to change to a different location.
Sure.
Would that be correct?
That is a concern, certainly. And again, getting that connection is really critical in order to make it a significant linkage, because otherwise, you're right, it kind of dead ends at a location and it doesn't benefit anybody at that stage.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Leanne. Anything else at this point? I'd like to I think at this time would it be appropriate to call the planning board up?
That's correct.
Mr. Chris DeShazer, please come forward and tell us what happened at the planning board, please.
Good evening,
Good
Mr. Mayor,
evening.
members of the board, folks. So that was a very interesting discussion that night. Where do we start? We were a little bit concerned before we heard from the applicant on multiple different things, and then we heard from the applicant. They had a fantastic presentation, and pretty much what they told us was that we were a little bit concerned because we were like, are there precedents? I'm looking at even the notes from this. It was just a rezoning. However, there's a lot of open-ended questions that were left open. Some of us some folks on the board liked it as was. Some folks on the board wanted it without condition number 3. But at the end of their presentation, we felt like it was a really good presentation for the rezoning. But there's a lot of other stuff that was a part of the presentation that gave a lot of color, that we were all kind of like, if you do this, right now you're giving us a lot of information that should be a part of the development plan and not just the rezoning. So that's kind of where we were. There's a lot of discussion around that.
Questions?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Shall we call the applicants at this point? Will the applicants please come forward and introduce yourselves? Appreciate you coming. Before we get to questions and answers, go ahead and appreciate the statement or statements.
Sorry, say that again, Mr. Mayor.
Your presentation.
Thank you, sir.
With Deptford.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Congratulations to the 2 new members up here tonight. I'm here tonight. I'm Tony Tate. My address is 5011 South Park Drive in Durham. Here tonight to present to you the Village Gate Master Plan rezoning project here, and want to recognize I have with me here tonight Ellie and Adams and Blood, who are the developers, owners, and visionaries, we think, for this project. They're here with us tonight. We have with us Laura Holloman and Tom Spalding from the Spalding Group, civil engineers and land planners. I have Mr. Bahong Wan, who is our traffic engineer, to answer any of the specific questions you have about escape routes or evacuation routes that you have. And so, again, just happy to be here tonight to present this project. I know it's been a lot of discussion about it, and Councilman McGrath has already seen the presentation one time, and with some prior notice, we shortened and condensed our presentation a little bit just because there has been some discussions, and we think a lot of people know about it, but we do want to provide enough information for the townspeople and the citizens that are here that don't know fully about our project. So I've been looking at this site for a little over a year and a half, and so Brenda Compton, the commercial realty broker, and I went to work for the Arbors and the Whites, the families that own the properties out there. And so we set out to look to set a vision for them as they look for people to try to buy the property and develop what's left of their family homestead, the farm that was there. And so for a year and a half, we've been sketching plans. We've been meeting with town staff, economic development, had a TRC after we submitted, but we've been looking at this site for quite a long time, and so there's been a lot of effort put into to what we've designed here, and so we feel like we have a great plan and really want to present that to you, and so make everybody feel comfortable with what we're doing. It's a legacy for the families, and they've had a lot of interest in portions of their property, and none of the people that wanted to buy the property really came up with something that was exciting or something that the town could really get behind. And so there were a lot of people that looked at the land, that came and talked to the town, and it wasn't really what the town was wanting. And so in our meetings with staff, we talked about mixed-use development and kind of what the town wanted to see. And so we started to develop a plan that we have before you today. So I'd like for Laura Holloman to come up and give you a little bit of presentation about the comprehensive plan and how we feel like we're meshing with that plan. So,
Hi, Laura.
Hi, thank you, Tony. Laura Holloman with the Spalding Group, 1611 Jones Franklin Road, Suite 101 in Raleigh. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight on this project. As Melissa stated, we are part of the Mixed Use Center designation, the brand new freshly stamped designation for the newly adopted comprehensive plan that was adopted on October 15th of this year, so just a couple months ago. You know, obviously, as Tony mentioned, this has not been something that we jumped in blindly or kind of feet first. We knew that this was going to be a strategic plan. We knew very early on that staff was going through a comprehensive plan update, so we made every effort to understand that. We went to workshops and town presentations to hear from both town staff as well as the surrounding citizens exactly what they wanted to hear. And a lot of, you know, what we heard over and over from town staff and, you know, especially in citizens, especially in some of those open discussion group meetings, were, you know, we want an identity, we want a sense of place, we want something unique. You know, we know that we can build really good single-family subdivisions, but we want something more, and want something more that we can latch on to, and everyone knows, yeah, I know exactly what we're talking about. That's in Holly Springs. So, you know, there are several recurring themes in addition to that that the comprehensive plan really latched onto. They talk about placemaking. They talk about encouraging pedestrian-oriented development. They talk about creating a sense of identity at gateway areas into Holly Springs, such as this. This is the Southern Gateway area. The new comprehensive plan lists important themes for transforming Holly Springs. The very first theme, they say, is establishing mixed-use activity centers throughout Holly Springs. The plan advocates for new activity centers throughout the community represented by the distribution of mixed-use walkable development. Integrated uses in a central location creates places where people live, work, and shop and play as a cohesive community. Mixed-use development and activity centers furthers the economic vitality of the town, the efficiency of utilities and transportation serving the area, and the sense of community experienced by residents, business owners, and visitors to the area. That's a lot to say that, quite frankly, the comprehensive plan has stepped up the game. It is not something that we have taken lightly. We have spent extra time and energy with the community surrounding us, hearing their input, knowing exactly what they want to be next to and what they want their families to enjoy going to do. We've really tried to hear from both the business community as well as the home community, even outside of our little required 200-foot bubble, to really get to what they want for this. And we're proud to say that the request before you tonight represents that. So with that said, I'll take it away to Tony to kind of highlight some of those vision areas. Thank you.
Like Laura said, we put a lot of time and effort into trying to design the site, because in creating the list of conditions to put on the site to make sure that the town gets, in the end, what we're trying to portray,
we had to come up with some plans to come up with conditions to make those things happen for the town and be there for future development. And so our vision is one that really transcends a full life here in Holly Springs, a life well lived, from early childhood development, from infants all the way up to an age-restricted multifamily housing. So it takes all aspects in between those ranges, and so we're excited about the different elements of the site plan. And so it's a place where we're creating an energy on the street where it's not just drive-by retail, it's not just drive-by services. There are uses in here where we're really creating a community and community activity and a place for families to go out and sit and watch their kids play on the gathering spaces out from the mixed-use retail restaurants and so forth. And so we're also, this was a personal thing with the developer, and we're committing to workforce housing within the units. It's an issue that's coming to all aspects of our lives, making sure that the people that work in these jobs are able to live close to where they work, so that they're not driving in from Dunn or Irwin or places outside of the community, adding to the traffic that is in the area. So it's all part of a global theme to try to help with that traffic. And so what I'd like to do is quickly run through a video fly-through of the site that's going to, now this is not meant to be, it's meant to be less specific, but we're trying to give mass and scale and show how the conditions that we have for the building set up close to the street and the majority of the parking in the rear or to the sides of the buildings, how those things work, and just give a sense of scale based on kind of what's there now in the Hampton Inn and what we're proposing. So this is a view headed north on South Main Street from the intersection of Ralph Stevens and South Main. So the properties are on both sides of the street. The building off to the right there is the back of the Walmart building. So buildings in the foreground are part of the South Point Shopping Center. And so we're going to turn around and head back south on South Main, where you'll see our tract number 1, which will have the age-restricted community there. That's a graphic of that building there. The next building on the left here is a smaller site where we hope to have a sit-down restaurant or a financial institution or something that fits that smaller scale, but a sit-down restaurant would go wonderfully and complement the existing Hampton Inn there. Typically, hotels like to have plenty of places for residents or people coming there to eat when they come to stay. The buildings here on the right is tract 2, where we've conditioned for it to be professional office, and we really think this is a great place for medical office with the hospital coming in. It's in great proximity to that. So we're excited about that site. We've got about 60,000 square feet of medical office there. And now we're entering tract 3, which is a 7-acre tract, and it's the site for the Oak Village Academy preschool, which you see here, which is made up of several different buildings. They're all fashioned after different architecture around the country. And so each building has a different age group. It's a really unique type of preschool that we can get into later. But between that, there's an art park that we've committed to, and it's got a little coffee stand on one end and a place for entertainment events and a place for public art there in the center. And then now you're looking at the mixed-use building that will have approximately 25,000 to 30,000 square feet of commercial retail on the first floor. There'll be shops and restaurants and all of the things that help add to the nightlife and the pedestrian-oriented feel of the site. And all those shops, or most of those shops, will overlook a synthetic ice rink, which will be a place for families to go and ice skate out there while, after eating a nice dinner. What you're seeing there on the second level are the amenities for that multifamily building. You got fire pits and pergolas and seating and amenities for that particular multifamily building there. So I think now as we kind of progress through, this is tract one. I won't spend a lot of time because we just talked about it quite a bit, but in tract one we have the age restricted apartment site there. It's a multi-story building, very urban in type, and so it's going to fit great with the Hampton Inn there. And you'll see this is tract two. Go ahead, Chris. This is tract two. This is the two office buildings where we have one smaller building, about 12,000 square feet, the square building, and then another building is about, I believe it's 24,000 square feet, but it's got parking underneath it, so we're trying to get the ratio of parking for a medical office, which is higher parking ratio than typical office. And so we're trying to get as much of that parking to the back as we can on that site. And then tract three, which is made up of the Solaris mixed-use building and the Oak Village Academy, which is really the main, that was the main driving point for the developer coming here. He was looking for a place to build another one of these facilities. He has one in Cary right up the road. It's very well received. All of the students have enough outdoor space where all the kids can be outside at one time, and that's done that way because they spend all of their time outside. Unless there's inclement weather, whether it's too hot or raining or too cold, all of their days are spent outside exploring and doing outside activities, growing gardens, and it's really geared toward outside play, and it's a really neat concept that so that's what they were looking for when they came here, and so it's a great addition. This is the art park. It's located in between the preschool and the Solaris building. You'll see on the right-hand end there's a small stage, another place for the kids in the preschool to come over and do something, or for kids in the apartment building, or just another place to have a community gathering area. And then along that strip is a place for display of public art. And so there's a fountain in the middle, and just a great place to gather and hang out and enjoy art, and go to the other end where there's a coffee stand, to be able to have just a place to sit down and ponder the day and drink a great cup of coffee. So I think now Laura's going to kind of go through the specific conditions that we put on the rezoning request that helps solidify what we see as our vision, helps to solidify that for you, the town, to know that you're getting what is in our vision. So.
Okay, and I'll try to go through this efficiently because I know Melissa has touched on this as well. But I just want to let everyone know that there's actually some teeth to what Tony just presented. So tract one, we're stating that those will not be typical multifamily units. Those are age restriction done with a deed restriction, which is actually more restrictive than a simple condition, or us stating that we're going to try to market it towards seniors. That's something that can be sued against in a court of law, and that's the covenants is the most restrictive thing that you can do in terms of a community like that to make sure that things happen the way that we say they are. Track 2, we've limited that to, as Tony mentioned, is professional use only. We certainly understand with the large hospital campus that is really going crazy right now in terms of already being vertical in a short amount of time. There's going to be a critical need for office uses. We know there's still some opportunities elsewhere, but we wanted to make sure that we're getting them in this area as well. Track 3 is stating that there's going to be a mixed-use component where we have a commercial, multifamily, professional office, as well as child care center, so that we're achieving that mixed-use center on all three sides here. As Tony walked through, that first condition that we have is very important when we talk about a mixed-use development option. That's a very specific ordinance that doesn't allow for a lot of wiggle room and loopholes. We know there's a certain amount of uses that count towards mixed use, professional offices, commercial uses, as well as having a tangible amount of residential. I remember when this was written back in 2008, that was a critical component of making sure that work, live, and play, the three components, were all here, and that's certainly stated. Also, as Tony mentioned, making sure the buildings and uses are up close. We have to have 75% of all structures utilizing a 0-foot setback, and that ensures that an urban streetscape is created and that we have street trees, as well as they talk about plazas and amenity areas, shared parking being encouraged. Also talks about amenities within expansive parking areas that breaks that up. That's exactly what that ARC Park does and why we wanted to make it a condition. So all these things together really starts to create what that comprehensive plan's talked about, which is doing something unique and celebrated. There was no prototype or critical plan when we started this. We just sat down with each other and said, what can we create and what can we do around the child care center that really starts to energize and make this part of town be walkable and be unique and be something that can connect all these exciting areas that are being developed around us. And we're looking forward to being good neighbors and being an amenity that all walks of life want to walk to and enjoy for many years to come.
So this next slide is another part of our presentation that we shortened from the planning board meeting. And so I want to go over enough of this to get you comfortable with what's being shown, but not go to the nth degree of detail that we did in the planning board meeting. We have our traffic engineer here that can come up and certainly answer specific questions, but the previous presentation, we kind of stepped through all of these different things, and so we've shortened it down. And so this composite map, similar to what Rachel showed you earlier, but this one kind of has all of the sort of global transportation improvements that are being done. And so as you can see, there are traffic improvements being made by others and us, and so the traffic improvements being made by others is part of the transportation impact analysis, and so all those things are taken into account. And so we've just kind of shown around this thing all of the improvements are being made. We have the different site access points that are part of that, and so we're happy to go into this in as much detail as you want, but the main thing that we kind of came out of this was at the intersection of Ralph Stevens, South Main, and the pedestrian connections coming to that point where we're creating the synergy, the hub of this site created around the mixed-use building. The pedestrian connections are all coming together there. There was an addition to the sidewalk coming in on Ralph Stevens from the Wildwood area up to the intersection. The Stevens Tract Townhomes is making sidewalk connections from the west, excuse me, to the intersection. We made a commitment to provide 2,000 linear feet of Greenway Trail to the south. And so, you know, initially we made that commitment so that the town could put it wherever they wanted it. But with the other things coming in, we decided that going south was going to be the best place. And so, again, this is kind of a global view of all the transportation improvements that are happening around here. We have a Greenway stub coming through the backside of our site in Tract 1, from the backside of the Ralph Stevens Tract property that brings pedestrians through the site and out to South Main Street, making that pedestrian connection. So I feel like we've made a lot of inroads in mitigating transportation impacts out there. We've got a lot of right turn decel lanes to get people out of the flow of traffic on South Main into the sites. And so again, Bahong is here and can speak to those things more specifically. And I think at this point, our developer would like to make, okay. So, okay. So, do you have any questions? We're
I'm
happy
sure we
to
do, yeah.
entertain those and answer them to the best of our ability.
Let's open up to the council for questions at this point. The applicant.
I'll start with an easy one. So one of the conditions for the track 3 for the art park, since we're jumping into a new Parks and Rec relook right now, it would seem to me, rather than restricting ourselves to the language that's very set in that art park, that our residents and our Parks and Rec folk may come up with, some creative ideas that could be incorporated there that wouldn't necessarily be an art park. So I like that portion of track 3, but I would like to see the language be a little more fluid, if you will, a little less specific. So for the rezoning specifically, so as we get closer to development, that as those ideas flow in, we've got a bunch of runner groups and other things like that, a bunch of people doing CrossFit in that part of town. It may be more suited to have, a CrossFit workout area as a portion of that, with the coffee shop and with some other stuff. But I don't want to, I would hate to see us helm ourselves in with a zoning condition that keeps it very specific to that, if that makes sense.
It does. And, the idea came out of some meetings that we had, and so we tried to incorporate some of those suggestions. And so the conditions kind of come out of, how do we ensure that we're going to get this? And so kind of coming up with that, but I understand your thought there.
I mean, I like the open space part of it. I would rather be a little less specific for the zoning portion of it.
Go ahead.
I guess the other side is I wouldn't want it where there's nothing there, so that
no,
it could be empty. So
No, I agree with
maybe
that.
don't say art park, but something that supplements or helps
Open
Parks and
space.
Rec, open space, but with some community.
I wrote down community park was my suggested
Yeah.
verbiage rather than art park, just community park.
Even community park is so I think so generic. So some, and it's language to some of those things. I compliment you on this come a long way, and you're one of the teams that have listened to us and talked to us. It is some of the wording around some of those restrictions that you're looking at, and the workforce housing, wanted to have a little bit more knowledge of that, because when I heard what was presented at the planning board, and Chris talked about that, there were elements of that, there was a lot of detail in there, but I'm sad to see it pretty much all went, and now it just says workforce housing without definition.
I'll
So
let him respond to that.
those were my questions around that.
Good evening, Elisa Blood. So talking about the workforce housing, I'm going to repeat a little bit what I said, planning board. The first thing, the workforce houses is something a little bit personal to me for two reasons. We owned and operated a chain of preschools. Up to about 8 years ago, we had 9 locations, one of them in Holly Springs, Little Pros Academy. We sold it about 8 years ago and started Oak Village Academy, which we hope to bring to Holly Springs. During our previous operating and also at Oak Village Academy, we are very, very engaged with our staff and teachers. We have focus groups at least twice a year with them. Early on, it was once a month when we first started. And the one thing that we always hear in all those meetings is that it's very hard for them because of the commute, because they cannot live close to where they work, because they can't afford the housing over there. So, not as a preschool operator, but as a developer, I personally made them a promise that we will very much consider in our other location to, if we have enough land and if we can afford it and if we can get permission, is to have affordable housing for them. So when this opportunity over here came along, we tried to incorporate the workforce housing. The other thing is that not too many people know, but during the winter, I work as a part-time as a ski instructor in Colorado. And I've been working with Vail Valley alone, have over 3,000 instructors in the winter. And those instructors come and work over there for very, very low pay. And I see how they live. Some of them live in closets, some of them live in a boiler room, some of them live 4 or 5 in one room. So I've been involved and in touch with these people, and that's why it's a little bit more personal to me and why I wanted to incorporate over here. We worked with staff and we talked to many of you folks individually about how to go about it. I know how it's done back in Vail Valley in Colorado. It's very, very simple. It's deed restricted and it's controlled by the developers and reported to the town. Okay? And we worked with staff, we worked with Wake County, and to try to come up with a language that is not existing yet and an enforceable tool that is not existing in town yet. We had much more language when we presented the workforce houses to the planning board, and planning board asked us to remove the language. Part of planning board wanted to remove it completely, part of planning board wanted to leave it completely, so we kind of compromised in the middle. We said, okay, let's just commit that we're going to have workforce houses. Let's commit that we have 50 units, okay, and during the site plan approval, we will work on the language and on enforceability of it that everybody is comfortable. So we are very committed to it. Okay, we put as a condition to have 50 of those units, and we are committed during the site plan process to come up with the language of it. So
I think it's too squishy now. It just says workforce housing without definition.
okay,
As we talk, I want to hear from other people. I have some ideas after doing some research of what could add a little bit of language back to make it, because I know your commitment, but it's nice to see it on paper too.
Okay. I just try to give you kind of a background, where it came from and where it went and why is it where it is today. So.
And this is not just for the staff for these.
No. This is
for
whoever works in Holly Springs that are below some threshold of income for household. Yes.
Would you be open to bringing back? And I would love to see the AMI condition come back. But instead of the AMI condition you have from 60 to 120. 120 is really, talking to some experts, is really market rate. So it sounds like the sweet spot would be from 50 to 80% AMI. I would if we had that kind of, it would feel like that is more of a commitment. But
and I'm with you. I'm I'm in the same range of where you are, yes.
If I can just go on that same discussion, I think, you know, it's a sensitive topic, and given where we are as a town, as you mentioned, we don't have any policies, ordinances, or guidelines to really stipulate how to do this. So I agree with Councilwoman Kelly at this point that I'm a little concerned that we don't have something more concrete. I don't think a conditional use statement is the right place to do it, but I think we have other tools that we could employ, such as a developer agreement, to maybe get into that discussion. And I think it needs to be a little more concrete. One of the reasons I would like to see that is, you know, and I'll ask this in the form of a question, but it sounds like you have a very personal attachment to wanting to do this and provide this kind of housing experience for not only your employees, but residents that live in Holly Springs. Does that mean that it's completely developer funded, or at any point in this process, whether now or at the development plan stage, do you plan to come back and ask for any taxpayer commitments or funding like development fee waivers, general subsidies, or anything of that nature?
Okay, our intention is not to ask for any subsidies going forward, but to get some concessions for developer fees or permit fees or whatever it is, only for those 50 units. Okay, nothing else. But after it's developed and after it's built, I'm not looking for the town to participate or fund or help with anything.
Understand.
Yes.
So I think my concern then is I don't want to be surprised at the development plan stage. And I think in one of our early conversations, I mentioned this, you know, to your team. I think it's in our best interest to figure that out now at the rezoning stage, because I can't look at a rezoning in good faith and say, let's go ahead and do this without understanding that concept, how much it's going to cost the town, what kind of development fees we're looking at, what other offsets. You know, it's a negotiation and a discussion, I think, that needs to take place before we can, at least for me, before I can evaluate a rezoning like this in good faith. But I appreciate your answers and your context to that.
Thanks.
Let me just say that as a small business owner, I understand what it's like to care deeply about the well-being of your employees, and I really wish that I had the opportunity to do something for them on the scale that you're doing for them. I think it's great. I think it's a wonderful thing to bring to our town. It's something that every municipality in North Carolina and across the country would love to have a developer volunteer workforce housing units. I agree with Councilwoman Kelly that there is no good definition for what workforce housing is. And the condition as it was previously written before the planning board at least gave some meat to that and gave us a better understanding. I agree that the AMI condition was a little off of what we were looking for. And when we were at the planning board meeting, and Sean can correct me if I'm incorrect on this since he was there too, there was two concerns with that. One was the specifics of the condition, correct, as far as who was going to be doing enforcement, and the AMI percentage and so forth. And two was actually attaching it to the rezoning, correct, as opposed to the development, correct? I'm of the mind that it would be better attached to the zoning because it could stick a little more. And if we had a situation where we were asking for development fees, which we could not meet, and we were surprised, as Mayor Pro Tem Berry said, that zoning could at least transfer, or at least potentially transfer. This is a conversation the council and I had about whether that is something that we could actually get to stick, and I think that's still an open question, correct?
Yeah, I mean, as far as income restricted housing, you don't have any authority to regulate that by the General Assembly. So it would have to be either done through a voluntary deed restriction or a contract set up like was talked about through a developer agreement.
So John, I mean, this is still from a developer agreement. And the question, just kind of digging through a little bit of North Carolina statute there and recent legislation, it looks like, from what I was reading, that deed restrictions in this state don't necessarily pass from owner to owner. So I did have some concerns about that. If this property is ever sold from one owner to the next, that deed restriction may not in fact hold with the property. So again, I'm not the lawyer here.
So
I just started doing some research in the last couple of weeks after we had this lengthy discussion with the planning board about the deed restriction part of it. So.
Sure, a deed restriction would pass to a subsequent owner. However, the current owner, could remove it. You can remove your own deed restriction. So we would, once the deed restriction would go through, we really don't have any Just like HOA covenants can change, we don't have any oversight in that process, and so.
So would it make sense to add as a condition to enter into a developer agreement to iron out the specifics of the workforce housing condition that he's proposing?
It would be cleaner if we were to bring you a fully baked developer agreement before you did your zoning. We certainly, you could make that a zoning you really can't make any zoning conditions that aren't offered by the applicant is the concern, is the problem.
My question, too.
You can't just, at this stage, just start lobbing conditions onto a zoning application and make it legal. So the alternative would be that we brought you a fully drawn up developer agreement prior to the rezoning.
I think there's a lot of things that need to be packaged into that, and quite frankly, like I said, I'm not comfortable for my own sanity moving forward with the rezoning without seeing that and understanding all the different terms and conditions that would be comprised in there. It would be difficult, I think, to take action without knowing that. We approve this rezoning as is, we lose all control. You get to the development plan stage, and there's a lot of rights that are then passed on that we don't have the ability to control or get anything over. And that to me puts the town in a difficult position.
I'll bring up a broader question that I had, and I know this goes to our last discussion as well, and didn't talk about this as much as the planning board, but the bigger concern I have with these parcels is they sit within our previously designated core growth area. So as we made this transition from the future land use, or to the future land use plan, last couple months ago, to this in a density perspective, and you look at some of the reasons we were trying to find different varying levels of housing in Holly Springs. We've gone from 1,000 apartments when we made that decision to try and do so to, in this area alone with a half a mile of these parcels, there'll be 1,167 apartments. So we no longer have a dearth of apartments, especially in this area. And this, as we've mentioned, is going to be right across the road from now one of the town's crown jewels, right, the hospital. And so from that perspective, and one of our other strategic goals, we're trying to move the needle on commercial properties. I just don't see this moving the needle on the commercial. So that's why I was asking for some of the percentages of, commercial versus residential, some of the questions about the sewage for commercial versus residential. I just don't see these three parcels moving the needle in this very heavy commercial area of our town that needs to be commercial, because we already have a significant amount of almost 1,200 apartments plus the townhomes that are going in there. There's a lot of residential in there, but we're kind of lacking that commercial side. So if we're really going to turn the corner at all as a town and get away from the 83-84% residential right now, and I know this isn't a whole lot of apartments, but I'm pretty confident we could probably put a 5-story, commercial complex here across the street from the hospital and probably still work things out. So that is really my larger concern with this project, and zoning it as such and not putting some type of stipulation as to a maximum amount of residential versus a minimum amount of commercial that goes in there, much like we did with Carolina Springs. And we're not going to allow occupancy, we're not going to allow just the residential build until X amount of occupancy is taken for the commercial build and it's filled out, so that we have some level of confidence, just like we incorporated into Carolina Springs, to make sure we don't just get more residential in here, which I already think we're between Pecan Grove, between Enterprise, between Hawthorne, between Village. We've got plenty of apartment complexes right there, and then more townhomes. So. And I appreciate the fact we're trying to find, housing that's affordable. I appreciate it, because as we talked about, my daughter is a special education teacher, so I've just had that discussion with her recently because she wanted to move to a nicer place, and she got a roommate so that she could find, a townhome to live in, and she has to, share property with someone else to get herself into an affordable house for her at her income level. So I certainly understand that and appreciate that. I know we need it in the town. I just am not certain we need it right in this area of the town right now. So with all the things we've talked about right now, I'm certainly not comfortable until we work a few more things out.
Eli, I know we don't have a development plan, but can you give us a quick rundown of how many units we're talking about on the different parcels on 1 and 3?
Yes. On track 3, we're talking about approximately around 30,000 square feet of restaurant and retail. We have approximately 150 unit of apartments, which 50 of them are going to be designated for workforce. So it's about a third. Track 2, we have 60,000 square feet of office medical, which is 2 buildings, 12,000 square feet, and 48,000 square feet. The track 1, we have the one site for either a restaurant or a lending institute or something like that, and approximately 180 units of age-targeted apartments.
So that's not an insignificant amount of apartments, and I understand Councilman McGrath's reservations with that. However, it does fit, at least in the terms of rezoning, with what we're looking for in that area, with the future mixed-use development designation, having that live-in residential, and if we're going to put residential there, doing it with these conditions, having the age restricted, near the hospital, near medical offices makes sense, having the workforce housing, some higher density apartments above the local business in a kind of denser area of town makes some sense. I like it because the age restricted community is not going to, at least I can foresee, bring children with them that are going to go into our school. So if we're going to put higher density houses there, at least this is the way to do it. So fitting with the purpose of what we're rezoning this to, I don't know if we could ask for a better use of putting the houses there. Are we looking for a reduction in the amount overall, or to just have this completely commercial?
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I
retail mix?
totally like what's on track 1 as well. I'm just looking at, if you exclude that age restricted from the overall square footage of the remainder of the properties on track 1, track 2, and track 3, I'm looking for, just like we have in Carolina Springs, a minimum amount of commercial versus residential that we have in there square footage wise. And that's what I'm looking at. So basically take the age restricted out of the equation of the square footage, because I do like that, and I think that's a need, and I think it's a perfect fit in our community right there. Because it doesn't impact the traffic. It's right across from the hospital. It's right next to the other wellness center that's going in very close in proximity with the Southern Crossroads. I just have a significant concern about the overall square footage in this area that was previously designated our very high density commercial, and we have not necessarily had all those discussions to figure out how our future land use plan coincides with our current UDO, because if you look at those max densities, they're very different from what they were, from what these parcels were designated 2 months ago to the way they're designated today for mixed use.
I understand. We're kind of in a limbo right now.
We're
transitioning.
We're kind of in the middle, but I definitely think there needs to be a bit more commercial.
Mr. Mayor, I would just like to address the council on one minor issue, is that you don't want to enter into your deliberation phase on this project prior to opening up the public hearing, and if the applicant has any further, sorry.
And I have one for you, Council, a favor. Would you go over one more time, so even I understand it, what we can do on a zoning versus a developer agreement? Is there restrictions between the two?
So, a developer agreement is just a contract between the town and the developer to do certain things. A rezoning, oftentimes, rezonings can be done with conditions, and this rezoning has a very meaty amount of conditions placed on it. What would be most beneficial is, typically a lot of what I'm hearing the council say is that some of those conditions are, you have concern with the definition of a lot of those conditions, such as what does workforce housing mean. That could be refined through a developer agreement, along with some of the other things that you sort of identified in your discussion phase here. So it's, a rezoning and a agreement put together, and that's an animal called the development agreement, like what you passed with Green Oaks Tech Center, with the sewer line. You're doing a land use and you're doing a contract sort of together at the same time. That's probably the best fit for this, but, you know, that's for you all to decide.
At this point in time, we can certainly open the public hearing. Is that appropriate for everybody right now?
I want to make one comment. if you don't
Oh, sure.
mind. Yeah. Regarding what you said, I think that talking about removing the residential over the track 3, two things. First of all, it's going to change everything from the comprehensive plan and going to take us into commercial. And I'm going to let Lori talk about it a little bit more because there's a certain amount of residential units that you have to construct within a mixed-use project. Before she said what she had to say, I just want to say one thing before public hearing, is that my partner always tells me not to get too emotional invested in a project, and I usually don't. But over here in this project, it was very hard to do because from the beginning, we worked so closely with the arborers, and we formed a very, very close relationship with them, and pretty much tried to create their vision. We worked with neighborhoods around the property and met with them so many times to listen to them and see what they want. We met with town council on several occasions, and we worked so closely with town staff to a point that I have their cell phone numbers, which I don't think they usually give to anybody. So, and we did get to a point where I wouldn't say we compromised, but we changed a lot from the plan, listening to everybody. We had 2 residential buildings. We listened to town staff and said, hey, why don't we just don't separate the workforce from the apartment. So when we met with some of the town council, say, okay, if we take this building and get it out of here, what would you like to say? And the reason it's called Art Park is because one of the town council suggested to put the art park over there. We make it whatever park you want it to do. If you want a water park, we do a water park. We spoke about connectivity and how people are going to get over there to everybody. So we said, okay, we're willing to do some greenway. We came up with the 2,000 feet. If we need to put another 500 feet and get it connected to somewhere, I don't think it's going to be an issue. So we change a lot, we listen, we work with everybody, and as much as I don't want to get emotionally involved, I am, because all the people that and I did do a project in town earlier, and I'm going to tell you one thing, that my experience working with town staff 10 years ago compared to today, it's completely 180 degrees. Okay, and I'm very glad it's like that, because my son will tell you for many, many years I said there's no way I'm going to do another project in Alice Springs. Okay, because of my experience 10 years ago, but my experience this time is completely different, and I do appreciate it. So, if Laura wants to say something about the
Sure. You know, that's, I think everybody touched on, you know, we first talked about doing mixed use because both the past and now the present comprehensive plan designates it as mixed use. So the first thing you do is you look at the mixed use development option within the UDO, and you have to have a minimum of 20% of any given use to achieve an appropriate mix of uses that guarantees that it's a true mixed use and it's not just heavy on one thing and not in the other. We've worked tirelessly on what that magic mix is to create a synergy so that one thing doesn't feel too heavy with the other, and tries to be cognizant of what's around us and what's still to come. I know that there's a lot of office employment center projects in the works right now in Holly Springs. We're certainly aware of that, and as well as other medical developments that are also in the pipeline. So we certainly are aware of what's happening around us, and we saw this as a really unique opportunity to bring kind of a separation of uses that what's occurring now. You've got residential over here, You've got big box over here, you got single family over here, and none of them really hybrid and work together. And that's what this is what we're trying to do at this hub area, is to kind of create a nice concentric ring of having everything together and not just have, you know, a separation of uses where things don't talk to each other and complement each other. So we feel like by doing this, it brings this all area together, and it looks well thought out and smartly planned, and it's not just kind of picking and choosing, which is kind of what's there now.
Okay. All right. I think at this point, if everybody agrees, let's open the public hearing. Does that make sense? Thank you all. Stick around, please. You got it. At this point in time, we'll open the public hearing. We have 5 people speaking. As I remind everybody, if someone has said the same thing you're going to say beforehand, you can always pass or speak. So let me call Colleen Bradley up first, please. And again, state your name and address, please.
Hello, Mayor and council members. My name is Colleen Bradley. I live at 305 Avent Meadows Lane. And that's in Holly Glen. I'm here today just to touch base briefly on the new development. I do like the new development. I'm not dead set against that. My concern is the traffic situation that Ralph Stavens will leave onto Avent Ferry Lane. By trade, I am an operating room nurse. I work at UNC Rex Hospital in the operating room. Correction, they just changed their, UNC Systems just changed their name 2 days ago to North Carolina Health. And in the mornings, it usually takes me 30 minutes to get there, but on the way home, it usually takes an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and a half. 35 minutes of that is usually from US 1 to Avent Ferry. And I chuckled with a police officer here about talking about speeding. Christina, we're lucky if we go 10 or 15 miles an hour on the bypass on the way home. But with that being said, my concern, number one, is safety, patient safety. Always with our patients is patient safety and have an excellent outcome. And the concern is traffic is so horrendous on that road. In Holly Glen, sometimes it takes us 10 minutes to even get out of the development. And if I had more time, we would sit here and go for a full minute without any conversation, and I think you would understand the frustration of that traffic area there. I am all for development in my field. I cannot tell you, even on a daily basis, with the new procedures, the new equipment, the new supply, and the team effort, we look at the overall picture of how it involves everyone on the team and the outcomes, and the long-term outcomes as well as the studies. And the concern here is we have many developments on Avent Ferry further on down towards Harris Plant, filtering into a 2-lane highway. I will tell you, I went to Western Carolina University. I did a lot of my clinicals in home health and a lot of the rural areas, anywhere from Franklin to Asheville, and never did I come upon a school that wasn't a 4-lane highway and a turning lane. So imagine my shock when I came here to Holly Springs, which we were really excited about, and we had 3 schools all together, side by side, and it's a 2-lane highway and 1 turning lane. And my frustration, I've been here 12 years, and hopefully in the next 6 months, we will have a 4-lane highway from Avent Ferry just to Castle Polk. But with that being said, we still have major problems further on down with all that traffic, and they're going to filter all that traffic from this development, especially if you have a residential area that will come on Avent Ferry to try to avoid some of the traffic on South Main. South Main is already around Walmart, a nightmare. Many of us go on the side of Walmart and come up and turn around to be able to get out quicker because, quite frankly, it takes a lot longer process, and it's very difficult when you come out of Walmart going right on South Main to 55 bypass. So it's a real cluster. And patient safety, town safety, human being safety is my major commitment. I can't tell you how many times people are so frustrated they pull out in front of people, and we're just lucky we don't have as many accidents as recorded. And in addition to the fact that everybody gets very angry and very upset waiting. So That's my biggest concern, that that issue is addressed, because the bottom line is we're going to have a lot more traffic on Avon Ferry from this project. Again, I think the project is great. I think we need to excel, and when the hospital comes here, I can guarantee you and reassure you the traffic is going to be much, much worse. So with that being said, I hope you will consider taking all of that information in account. And somehow, I don't have all the answers. I know I'm not supposed to come to you with a problem and not have a solution. That's how we always deal with everything. But I certainly think that we need to think about 4-lane highways on many of our 2-lane highways. And I know DOT, we have to work with them, and it's money. But I think that's more important than, I know we have a big project with the dog park and everything else. I love dogs, but I think some of that money needs to at least help alleviate the upcoming projects that we have with the 4-lane highways of some sort, especially in this area that's really a cluster. I don't want all these people becoming my patients unnecessarily, even though I do like my job. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you. Patsy Edwards. Same story, please. Name and address.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm here in support of the rezoning and development of the 19-plus acres located on South Main Street Extension and Ralph Stevens Road. I am Patsy Yarborough Edwards, one of 8 Yarborough siblings ranging in age 59 to 78. My family has lived on this land over 120 years, both maternal and paternal. Our paternal grandparents had 3 of their 5 sons serving abroad during World War II and were proud to return home to farm this land they loved. Words like connectivity, holistic, greenways, infrastructure were not part of our vocabulary at that time. No farm to table. Everything was from our farm to our table. 3 generations farmed this land until farming was no longer profitable, at which time parcels were sold to Walmart and later to Hampton Inn. At this season in our lives, we desire our family's legacy and that of our forefathers be something that would be beneficial to and serve the community, and we feel this project would do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Kim Van Cannon. Did I? This time? Did I do it wrong last time? Probably. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Kim Yarborough Van Cannon, and I currently live at 1024 South Main Street, Holly Springs. I'm here on behalf of my family. We're in support of the rezoning and development of property located at South Main and Ralph Stevens Road. I will kind of skip over some of this because I know some of it's repetitive. Some of you have heard it. Some of you may not have. Our parents farmed there until their retirement. It became a thing of the past. They did have developers want to buy their property for housing, which they did not want to do. My father felt that the town needed to grow in a commercial way. So in 2007, they sold part of the farm for the Walmart shopping center. In 2010, the town rezoned and approved the Hampton Inn that was built on our property. This setting the scene for commercial and mixed use. I currently live on the property with one of my other siblings, but with the recent growth, it has become difficult to enjoy residential life there. This is not a place for single-family dwelling. Our family has supported and worked with the town and with the widening of the South Main Street, even as far as draining our beautiful pond, in preparation for what was being planned for more dense commercial mixed uses. We have marketed this property for now over 10 years in individual parcels with no or little success. You know, the town wanted no car washes. They wanted no fast food or small retail places there. The town wanted no confused mixture, no hodgepodge here or there. So we're actually being surrounded and feel like we're kind of stranded, as one of my friends said in a meeting not long ago, a surveyor of ours, Ben Dorr, for probably over 40 years. He said, we're on an island. And personally, I love islands, but that's not the kind of island I prefer to live on. So we just sit around on our own property waiting for someone to decide what we can build there and when it can be developed. So that's when we went to the time that we spent money and time and acquired the services of Tony Tate and Brenda Compton. And as they've said, they've worked diligently with the town. And then we found our developer, Ellie Zeblood, and he was very correct when he said that he was emotional when it comes to this project. I've never met a developer that has been so forthcoming and updating us. We have met on several occasions. I think he is a man that is committed to what he says he's going to do, and I think he's able to master plan this development. And it would be a place that our family can look back and remember our family legacy. So we're in support of the rezoning of this property as we feel it falls in line with the town wants and has planned for. We thank you for your time and respectfully request your consideration of this project and allow it to move forward. Thank you and Merry Christmas to all.
Thank you, and Merry Christmas to you. Brenda Compton.
Good evening, council. I know most of y'all pretty well. I've been working in Holly Springs, commercial real estate broker, bringing quality development to this town for about 18 years. Worked with many of the staff members here and lots of the council members and people here, and been proud to be part of this. We represent, along with the Yarboroughs and the Whites that are part of this rezoning, Renee and Alan Lorden, which is on the far, by track 1, the development that you see there, or the open property that you see there is now residential housing, and the Whites, which are part of the Yarboroughs tract here, that's tract E. So through Renee and Alan, they're in support of this rezoning. Through Randy and Roseanne White, they're in support of this rezoning. And as far as what we've tried to do through Tony Tate, through Eli, through the rest of the people that have been working with staff and others trying to set a tone for this area, the synergy of this area. I think that what's happening here is in compliance with your long-range comprehensive plan, and I don't know anything else to say except for I think everybody's tried to bend over backwards and work with the town and the powers that be here to try to bring another quality project to the community, and we hope you support it.
Thank you, Brenda. And lastly, but not leastly, Stephanie Enby. I was close. Thank you. All right. I'll blame you. No, I won't.
That works. Good evening, Mayor, Sears, Council. I'm Stephanie Embry. I live at 304 Mistwood Hollow Circle in the Wildwood community. I'm here on behalf of the community. 2 of us were nominated to come out during the holidays. We're usually here in more force, but it is the holiday season. We are here in support of Village Gate. I would like to first thank, as always, all the town staff who have patiently answered our questions, met with us, and listened to our suggestions. That includes Melissa Sigmund from Planning, Rachel Jones from Engineering, Adam Huffman, and Leanne Plumer from Parks and Rec. One of the reasons for the location of the Greenway and the pedestrian crossway is our input. So we were trying to stop our neighborhood from being reassigned to Fuquay Varina. One of our strategies revolved around walkability to the high school, and that Greenway helped, and the Parks and Recs department listened to us, as did the developer. I'd also like to thank the development team. Mr. Zeblood and his team met with us twice. The Yarborough family met with us once. When we first heard about this rezoning, we were deeply concerned. 2 reasons. One, the article written in the Holly Springs magazine was completely misrepresented the development. I still don't know where they got that, but it was nothing like what you have seen, what we understand this to be. The second was, anytime there's a rezoning, we get nervous. because as you all know, once land has been rezoned, you lose most of your legal ability to stop. If it's rezoned community business, anything that fits the UDO legal definition of community business can be built there. And that means 80% apartments, 20% commercial can be built, and there's almost nothing the town can do to stop it. We've all seen towns get sued when they tried to stop developments that fit within a UDO or a zoning, and it usually is very expensive and the town loses. So we were very nervous until we met with Mr. Zeblood and his team. We really do think this fits. This is our corner of Holly Springs. We are right beside where the Lowe's and the Wegmans are. And while the hospital is across 55 from where this is all going to be, it's literally across the street walking distance from us. So we are all very happy. We have a neighborhood with a lot of different people with a lot of different opinions. I have never seen us all agree on anything. Like, everyone agreed that this was a really good solution for our little corner of Holly Springs. My only objection is the description that the age-restricted facility will be so neighborly because the median age of residents tends to be women of a certain age. I can assure you in my neighborhood, it is women of a certain age who cause all the trouble and throw all the best parties. We are not going away. Public safety can make plans now. You bring a lot more into that facility, just be prepared. I do want to say, though, one of the reasons that we like this particular rezoning is because everything is tied, the conditions tied to the deed. We have complete faith that if Mr. Zeblood builds this, it's going to be wonderful. Life happens, things happen. If you don't tie things to the rezoning, then again, just rezone it commercial business, and something happens and Mr. Zeblood doesn't develop Village Gate, next person who comes in, we're going to get 80% residential, 20% commercial. That's not what we want. So everything that can be done to tie this to deeds and to conditional use rezoning to protect us in the unlikely event that Village Gate is not developed, we support. That's one of the reasons we like this. We also like the workforce housing. We're supportive of that. And frankly, in terms of the number of apartments, as people who can look through at the 500 units going up literally across a creek from us, 150 apartments is not going to make a difference. It is not going to make a shred of difference. What is going to make a difference is at the corner of Ralph Stevens Road and South Main, there's a medical office building, a professional office building, which is going to alleviate a lot of traffic for us. We like that idea. The apartment complex up closer to Village Walk Drive, that's not going to impact us that much. And we really like the plans for the Solaris. We need retail in that area. I think the odds of getting full retail on that property are very low. For retail, you need high density. We think a mixed-use building at that corner makes a lot of sense. This is I am confident that what we are going to get is something that my neighborhood will want to walk to. We fought to get sidewalks on the north side of Ralph Stevens Road. We also asked them to put in pedestrian crosswalk. I will remind staff town council, that's now 2 pedestrian crosswalks across Ralph Stevens and South Main. The town hasn't, I don't think you had to pay for the first one, maybe you did. But we're 2 down, 2 to go, and we will be back until that entire corner has safe pedestrian crosswalks on it. But we think what is planned on Track 3 with a daycare and the green space and a mixed-use development that will give us some desperately needed retail. And again, with all that is going on there, 150 apartments is not going to make a difference to us. So we are excited about this, and we encourage you to approve it.
Thank you. And I'd like you to call me next week for our first senior citizen committee. We'll talk about it. And I will make you chair personally.
You're looking for a party.
Party time. All right, at this point in time, I'm going to close the public hearing, and I'm going to turn over the board for further discussion. Whoever.
I had some very specific questions around the traffic going in and out of Track 3, because when I looked at some of the diagrams, it looked like there were medians that were going farther. I'm trying not to duplicate a Holly Springs Road where people are doing U-turns to go back in. So I'd like a little bit more clarity on traffic in and out of track 3, particularly because is there just one entrance into track 3? Because the other land is not owned by, is not part of this development. So I'd love to understand that more. Especially if you're coming from, you went to Chick-fil-A and you want to bring your kids into the daycare, are you having to go to the corner and turn around? Because I don't think you can do a left in, right?
I'm just curious, Councilman Kelly, that's not going to be part of the zoning though, right? I mean, that'll be part of the development plan. I mean, that could change potentially as we go forward, right? So, because that's not a conditional for the zoning.
It's not, but I'm trying to understand the traffic.
Okay.
'Cause the traffic
I get that.
is the worst, is the
Yeah.
thing I've heard the most. I'm just trying to feel for making sure that we're,
Because I had a question.
because no other, I don't know how else, there's only one entrance, right?
Right, because that was the question I had at the planning board, and I have the same question. Is the exit out of that? Because right now there is no exit out onto the main road there. Yeah.
So I'm just concerned about that for the, even though it's 150 apartments, the daycare traffic during rush hour.
So for tract 3,
Tract three,
cursor
yeah.
there, South Main Street, there will be a left in to that
Okay.
track. I think something that we discussed during planning board is the proposed cross access as a form of the secondary means of ingress egress into tract 3 that is shown as proposed through this adjacent site that is part of Southern Crossroads. That would allow them full access onto Ralph Stevens Road. That is dependent on the adjacent property owner working with and cooperating with the petitioner that is before you tonight. We did speak with the Fire and Rescue Department to confirm that there would be a secondary means of access needed. An alternative that might be explored is some sort of public access, cross-access connection through the Walmart parking lot. He indicated that today that's a designated fire lane already, and so that could be an acceptable form of that. So I think it's something that would be explored further with the development plan review process and have fire and rescue input on that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, traffic was definitely what I have heard is concerned here in that area.
Continued comments and/or questions?
If I could just go back to Melissa, some questions on density. If we could just clarify some of the earlier questions that were asked related to what's permitted under our current ordinance for the mixed use option and like the 285 units, I just want to clarify a few things there. So on the calculation of the 20%, it would be the gross floor area of the entire complex, all 3 tracks, is that right?
So Councilmember Berry, it does depend because we don't have a development plan request in front of us. It depends on what is submitted with a single development plan. A development plan could entail one or more of the various tracks or different buildings that you saw on the representations. And so whatever the entirety of that submittal is or that request, we would look at that. And then as was mentioned, there are a couple different ways that can be calculated depending on whether these are standalone single-use buildings with multiple buildings on a site of different uses, where you might be looking at acreage versus a building that has multiple uses. So if we have the vertical mixed-use building, where we could be looking at floor area and shared amenities. So those calculations would be determined generally through our first pre-submittal meetings, through the scoping and concept meeting process, talking with the developer about what their proposal is and how the application of the mixed-use criteria would apply. So each project is very unique, and that's desirable, but it does mean we need to look at what they're doing and how we could attribute those requirements as far as the square footage versus acreage and how the numbers would be calculated.
Okay. And is staff's interpretation of our UDO that the 15 units per acre would be the maximum, and it's not an unlimited maximum under the mixed-use option today?
So this is something that speaks to, as was mentioned earlier, the point we are in our process in terms of having a new land use plan in our comprehensive plan and our current UDO. So what our current UDO states in the mixed use option is that you have a 15 dwelling unit per acre maximum unless you're in certain areas those areas, the language really applied to our old land use plan. It spoke to our community growth areas, which are CGAs, or our regional centers, which at the time, this area was a regional center. It has been redefined as the mixed-use center. We've briefed, I think, the council that there will be UDO updates, short-term Band-Aid quick fixes that will be approaching council at a future workshop after the first of the year. So going into the new year, talking about what some of those changes might be. So as of today, the language being what it is, there would be a maximum 15 dwelling unit per acre on that property if a mixed-use development plan comes in today. With those conversations, this would be a very good opportunity for staff and council to look at whether the language should just transfer. Would this area, as it was intended, should it still have a greater density or not? So that would need to be changed if there was a desire to have that a minimum density as opposed to maximum.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments? Other questions or comments?
I guess is there adversity? I mean, what I'm generally getting at here is, you know, as I'm talking about Carolina Springs and trying to make sure we have a commercial, I mean, just eyeballing this, I mean, I would guesstimate, since we don't have an accurate count of square footage, that we're looking more along the lines of 70% residential square footage and about 30% commercial. Best case here, because we've got, you know, the age restricted and the apartment complexes and not a whole lot of other square footage. So we're quite honestly upside down based on what our strategic outlook for the town is trying to get more residential. Now, if we discount, like I had mentioned with Councilman Wolf there, you know, to discount the age restricted portion of that, I think more appropriate, if we're going to put a conditional use on these parcels, is to make sure we don't find ourselves. So I think there was some misinformation that, you know, we could find ourselves in an 80% residential. I mean, if we zoned it just basic commercial business, yeah, of course we could mixed use, but that's not what we're after. I mean, we have control over that right now, and the control we have is to zone that appropriately so that there is no more than X percentage of residential on this property. So we don't find ourselves, if we do decide to redo this as UDO unlimited, because of what this was previously designated as a regional center. So I would hate to see us be put in that position, and if, you know, God forbid, you know, he gets run over by a bus over Christmas. I hope you don't. And something changed. So I wouldn't want to see us rezone that to this just to be, you know, mixed use and then have that potential occur. I'd feel a lot more comfortable with a conditional use that gives us, like Carolina Springs, a developer agreement. In addition to this, as we've mentioned, that talks about a max percentage of that residential, so we don't find ourselves in that jam.
Other comments?
I would completely agree. I think, you know, we're on this path, and, you know, PUD's what Carolina Springs is and what Green Oaks West is that's in progress. I mean, those are rezonings. They're PUDs. They're a little bit different and unique, but they are rezonings. This is still a rezoning. I think a developer agreement is applicable here, given some of the things we're doing from a mixed-use standpoint. And in order to protect the town in the future, I think we need to do a number of things within that policy tool to get the desired outcome. One of those things is limiting the density on the residential piece to either a percentage of the total units or total parcel basis, or the total number of, you know, apartments. They've discussed what they think the plan might look like, but if we could memorialize that in a development agreement, developer agreement, I'd feel more comfortable. A couple of the other concerns I think that need to be addressed within that document would be the workforce housing plan. I think, you know, as I mentioned earlier about the costs and asks, development fee waivers associated with that, I'd rather not be surprised at the development plan stage how much the taxpayers are going to have to, you know, leave on the table or contribute from a development fee standpoint. I think we need to be concrete about what that is and have a discussion as a board what we're willing to do, because we don't have any other policy tools to govern that right now. That's an important point. Next thing, the sewer. I'm very concerned about the sewer line expansion. I'm not an engineer, but I am confident that this project's impact will require us to make improvements to our downstream sewer infrastructure, the lines and the pump station at the Bass Lake portion, without having a sewer study now. I think we're premature in taking up a rezoning. We rezone it, the impacts can come in, and then all of a sudden we have a development plan. The town could be on the hook for a multi-million-dollar expense that we have not planned for, and our ratepayers would have to take on to be able to afford the developer the opportunity to move forward with this project without fully understanding what that commitment is going to be from the town and what the developer has to do from a sewer and water standpoint. I just think we're premature in evaluating the zoning, and I think we could work some of those things out through a sewer study in advance so we're all aware of what those conditions and what those costs are going to be. And then 2 more things. The Greenway, as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Zablud and I have talked about this at length. I feel comfortable with his commitment to do the right thing and make sure we have a connection there that would give 800 homes immediate walkability to this site and would actually bring value to the current residents of our town. We just need to memorialize that in the zoning conditions or in the developer agreement. And then lastly, I mentioned the light poles earlier. You put a nice development like this at this corner and we have wooden light poles at that intersection, it just doesn't mesh. We've got to figure something out, and I think that's something, it's not the developer's fault that that's occurred, but I think there's a partnership or something we can figure out to make that better, to increase the overall appearance of the development. It just detracts from what would be there in the future. And then in summary, I think there's a lot of merit to this project. I don't have a lot of qualms with the uses. The senior active adult living community is something we hear a lot about on this council. That use will go a long way, for all of our residents. The medical office buildings are going to be in need. The daycare is in need. I have 3 young children. This is very close to my house. That would be fantastic. I've researched the facility. The concept is very unique. There's no other daycare facility in our town that does something like what Oak Village Academy does. I think that's great. I share Mr. McGrath's concerns, Councilman McGrath's concerns about the residential units, but I think through the developer agreement, we can get there on what needs to be done. I don't feel like I can support this as is tonight, so if we move forward with action, I wouldn't be comfortable approving the rezoning, but I am open to tabling the matter, working with the development team on a developer agreement that would both be mutually beneficial to them and to the town to move forward.
I agree. I think I'm excited about the project. I think it brings a lot of unique things. I think it's a pretty good use of the land that we have there. I'm not as concerned with the density of the housing units. There's 2 sides to it. I mean, I'm looking at it from an affordability standpoint. Since the developer offered up this workforce housing, I think it's a great opportunity for our town, and having these units at below market value is one side of it, but the other side of making sure that we stay affordable is making sure that we're keeping up with the demand by giving supply. So I think it's a decent trade-off to add what we're discussing here. It comes down to about 100 units to get those 50 units that are specifically designed for our teachers and our firefighters and our local employees and service workers. But I am completely comfortable and agree that probably the next step would be ironing out some of these details, especially with my concern, the specifics of the workforce housing. With the developer agreement, I'm fine with that.
Anybody else?
I just wanted to say, I wanted to thank the Yarborough and White family. I've known many of you for a long time, and I hear that you're passionate about the land and division. So I think those are things that this project has some great elements that will help fill out that part of town, because I do see those islands. So I'm hopeful that we can keep moving forward and talking through some of the details, because I think that's where we're at right now, some of the details. I definitely would like to see some more stickiness to the workforce housing requirements and what that is. Looking at the flow of traffic, I think Councilman Berry pointed out the lights. Some of those things I think are important, but I am favorable of this project moving forward. Just in how we finalize the agreements, I think will be important.
We've chatted about this a lot, and I think one thing that I want to say, just my personal opinion, is I learned yesterday that the new number now for numbers of people moving into this county per day, it was 67, that went 77, and yesterday on TV, and you can always blame TV, or you can always believe TV, it's 100 people a day moving into Wake County. So my personal concern as it relates to residential is not as acute as some. It's just me talking. I may need your help on this one. Tell us what we can do and tell us what we can't do. Again, please. You've heard all the comments.
You could table it, and
Table is one.
and you could vote for the rezoning as is, and you're going forward as a leap of faith.
Okay.
on some of the terms. The developer has a very good track record with the town, so that's in your purview. Or you could deny the rezoning, but those are your three options, and be happy to work with a developer on coming back with a more formalized agreement that may address the council's concerns.
What's your feelings?
I support that, tabling it so that we can keep working on the details of the agreement.
Let's try to have consensus here. Yes, go ahead. I didn't hear you.
Table, sorry, table so we can keep working on the agreement.
Table. Agree.
All right. Might want to make a motion. Any more comments on that? Any more discussion? Okay. Might make a motion, please?
Make the motion to table rezoning petition 19 REZ03 to a future meeting.
Second.
Motion been made, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We'll keep trying.
If I could do a follow-up motion as well, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to direct the town attorney to work with the development team to negotiate a developer agreement and keep us apprised of that progress.
Second.
Motion been made, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously, and I think that's very, very important. So I think we all like this project, and let's get the finite details. One question I had for the future, just between us friends here, is at one point in time, I would love to hear more about what the differences will be with a workforce or a affordable housing apartment versus a regular apartment, as specific as possible. That's just me talking to you. That's what I think. Okay? So I think we are done with that for the time being. And thank you for your patience. And I also thank you, Counselor, for your comments. And let's go on from there. We'll wait for a minute. Are you Sean tonight?
No.
What did I miss? Oh, I did. Yeah, I did. I turned the page too fast.
Shh, this will be short.
Agenda item 8B, public hearing, voluntary annexation, A1906, the New School, Inc., property owner, Melissa Sigmund.
Thank you,
Did
Mayor
I
and
get it
Council.
right? Got it right.
Yes. So the next item is an annexation. So the request is to conduct a public hearing and adopt the annexation ordinance. The requested annexation is for about 11 acres. It is contiguous to town limits. There are no additional development requests at this time. There's an existing Montessori school, and the intent is to connect to town sewer. So they're asking for this so that they can connect to our sewer system. With that,
Comments or questions at this point? Hearing none, we'll open and we'll close the public hearing because there's no one signed up. Further discussion?
So I had asked some questions today on, this is a school with multiple students being added to, what are the benefits for our town for annexing this area?
so I think that there were some answers in terms of cost benefit from an infrastructure standpoint.
So as Melissa mentioned, the annexation was triggered by the desire of the applicant to connect to town sewer. They currently have a septic system that has failed, so they are pumping and hauling off-site what would normally be treated in the septic system or a public sewer system. So it is a critical situation that we met with the petitioner and walked through the different scenarios. So with this annexation, they also have a construction drawing in the review process for the gravity sewer extension that would connect to our town sewer system. The public water connection would come at a later time, either with the expansion of the school that they are planning to come in with via development plan. So in order to track and bill the school for the public sewer, that they'll be, receiving that service through the town, there'll be a temporary meter placed in a manhole, and that's how we'll be able to, bill them for their usage. And then at which time they connect to town water, they'll have a water meter that will do, that tracking and billing for us.
So we'll get fees for sewage and water.
Correct.
Okay.
So there is no planned expansion or additional student population being added at this time.
Do you have any sense for the traffic during rush hour and parents going in and out of that school? Is that causing issues on Sunset Lake Road?
I don't know of any issues today.
Okay.
The time that they would come in with any expansion, we would assess for traffic impacts, and
Okay.
if there were any additional improvements needed, we would address it at that time. But I don't know if you're aware of anything that's going on today.
Okay.
Can you just hit on some of the road improvements that are going on that part of Sunset Lake? I know we're getting pretty close to our boundary right there with Fuquay, but as NC 540 opens up, the interchange of 540 and Holly Springs Road is not too far down the road, and that corner is pretty challenging, quite honestly, coming out of there, having looked at some properties in Sunset Village and coming out of there right where that school is. It is a challenging corner, and as far as road widening goes and other road improvements that are going along Sunset Lake Road to widen that out there, do you have a sense for that?
So there is, if you've visited our transportation bond website recently, there is a bond-funded, partner-funded project on Sunset Lake Road that does extend across the frontage of the school. They've purchased these two properties as well. The initial school was built on this kind of triangular property, but that's kind of a project that we know that will be partially funded and then hopefully fully funded through partnerships in the near future. So that's a purple project on the
Would we
bond.
potentially expect then some type of fee in lieu of road improvements as they come forward with that development plan then?
Right, so if the development plan comes forward before those improvements, have been contracted to be built, then they would either be responsible for building what improvements are triggered from their impact or paying a fee in lieu toward future improvements.
Other questions? Another question? Are you ready for a motion? We have one.
Motion to adopt annexation ordinance A 19-06, annexing 11.2 plus or minus acres owned by the New School Inc. into the corporate limits of the town of Holly Springs.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 8C is a public hearing. This is the Norris Holland Hair House landmark designation. Sean, you're taking this one?
Yes.
Sean Ryan, Planning and Zoning.
Good evening, Council.
Good evening, Sean.
Excited to be here presenting for you tonight an ordinance for consideration of a local historic landmark designation for the Norris Holland Hair House. Tonight we will have a public hearing on the ordinance and then a motion to consider the ordinance. Just some background for the Council on local landmarks. North Carolina General Statutes does authorize local governments to designate certain historic landmarks within our jurisdiction. Holly Springs is part of an interlocal agreement with Wake County and other municipal governments that are part of the Wake County Historic Preservation Commission. This commission does serve as the Town's Preservation Commission under this agreement. Local historic landmark is a property of special significance in terms of its history, prehistory, architecture, archaeology, and/or cultural importance, and that it possesses integrity of design, setting, workmanship, materials, feeling, and/or association. There are some benefits that go to the property owner with this designation, including a 50% property tax deferral, which helps the property owner save money with the rehab and maintenance of the structure. Just a quick overview of the designation process. Initially, there's an investigation of the property, which is then reviewed by the State Historic Preservation Office. The Wake County Historic Preservation Commission will review that information and make a recommendation. And finally, the Town Council is responsible for establishing that local historic landmark, which is why we are here tonight. With that, I'd ask that we open the public hearing and then invite Jeremy Bradham with Capital Area Preservation to give a presentation on the house.
After the public hearing or before? You want to do that now?
Open the public hearing, please.
All right. I'll open and close the public hearing. No one signed up?
With that, I'll invite Mr. Bradham up.
Welcome, Jeremy.
Good evening, Mayor Sears and Town Council. My name is Jeremy Bradham. I'm with Capital Area Preservation. We're the staff for the Wake County Historic Preservation Commission. I'm honored to present, technically it'll be y'all's third if you approve tonight, historic landmark. You did have the Mims House, and then recently the Holloman House at Holloman's Crossroads was incorporated as well. So this will be your third if approved. The address of the North Holland Hair House is 2329 Avon Ferry Road. The owners are Corey and Nikki Reed, who purchased the house just recently from y'all about 2.5 months ago, and they've been working diligently ever since on the restoration of the house. It's located on the south side of the road, pretty much halfway between Holloman's Crossroads and downtown Holly Springs, about 3 miles from here. The proposed landmark boundary is 0.58 acres. It encompasses 2 actual parcels that were part of land historically associated with the house. The North Holland Hair House is in an area originally known as Collins Crossroads, which is today known as Holloman's Crossroads, settled in the 1770s. The original settlement is believed to have been actually Avon Ferry and Cass Holt Road, roughly about 1.5 miles from this house. The Norris family was living in Wake County as early as 1790. Prior to 1800, John Norris Jr., he was the head of the Norris family. He received multiple land grants, including 4 in Wake County. We don't know which one of those land grants this house was eventually built on in the early 19th century, but we do know it was one of those 4. John Norris Jr. served in the Revolutionary War as a militiaman under Colonel John Hinton. He passed away in 1822 and left his property to his son, Needham Norris. Based on lack of documentation, we don't know exactly when the house was built, but Needham Norris married his wife in 1805. And when I did the initial evaluation of the house about 3 years ago, this house was believed to be built in the 1850s, but based on its floor plan, the 1805 to 1815 date is pretty much expected for this house, which would make it the oldest house here in Holly Springs. Needham Norris was born to John Norris and Patience Saunders Pearson in 1775. After 1805, when he married Polly Adkins, they had 9 children together. What's interesting is Needham Norris worked as a farmer and served as the minister of Holly Springs Baptist Church. He also operated a grist mill, today what is Bass Lake Park, so that's where his grist mill was. Fast forward a little bit, this is that hall and parlor plan. I'll mention it briefly. I don't want to bore you all with a bunch of architectural details, but there are very few of these in Wake County and North Carolina as a whole. So for y'all to have one here in Holly Springs is pretty incredible. In 1850, Needham Norris was recorded as a farmer who owned real estate valued at $1,200 and lived with his son, Saunders. When Needham Norris passed away in 1852, his property passed to his nephew, Simpson Washington Holland. On March 3rd, 1853, Holland married Mary Ann Matthews from Fayetteville, and the couple had 5 children together. This is a portrait of Simpson Washington Holland. His life is a little clouded in terms of how he passed away. As you know, the Civil War had a major impact here at the very end of the war here in Holly Springs, but he actually left in 1864. He wrote a letter to his wife and basically wrote his last will and testament on September 19th, 1864. It's interesting, he passes away just 2 months later on November 17th, 1864 in Richmond. He supposedly went up there, according to family legend, looking for his brothers fighting in the war to bring them home. There was a siege of Richmond going on at the time. He's actually buried in Richmond, and he's honored to be buried in Hollywood Cemetery with a marker that actually has him as a Confederate States Navy, which is odd because he was only there for 7 weeks. And the records I found actually have him as being forced and conscripted to be a guard of actually one of the hospitals up there. So very little is known about what exactly happened. All we know is he didn't come home, and he's not buried here. So because of that probate record that he wrote, it passes to his wife, to his widow, and then the children. And it pretty much stays in the family throughout the 20th century. So his widow, Mary Ann, and their children were affected by the war itself. There's a lot of family lore around the house, but supposedly it was also used as a hospital as federal troops camped here at the very end of the war. And the family supposedly helped nurse a particular Union soldier back to health, and therefore the house was spared. Simpson Washington Holland's house being left to his children, it stayed in the family, as I mentioned, up into the 20th century. It became under the ownership of his grandson, Exum Hare. So there's your Norris Holland Hare connection. The land continued to be farmed throughout the 20th century. That's when some additions were made in the 20s and 30s to the back L of the house. But it did remain in this entire family all the way until the year 2004. December 2017, Town of Holly Springs purchased the house in order to save it from demolition and make room for the new residential development. As I mentioned, the Reeds purchased it in 2019. It does have a historic preservation easement with us, with Capital Area Preservation, and they are diligently working on restoring the house under those guidelines, which will be continued through potential landmark status. I just want to give a basic overview. As I mentioned, I don't want to go a bunch and bore everyone in here with a bunch of architectural details, but we do have a pretty typical Holland parlor plan. That's why it's not symmetrical. I'm very symmetrical in the way I like to look at things, but that door is not lined up because the stair hall is actually right there to the right when you walk in, and it's an enclosed stair hall. That front room is actually called the hall, and the smaller room is called the parlor. They were built for about 150 years all throughout the U.S., but really we don't really see them that late, which makes this also unique. Let's see, let me bore that. By the way, that porch is being restored by the owners here soon, so it looked very different than those 1950 columns. The chimneys have actually been restored here in the last month. We do have a nice Flemish bond, which I'm not going to bore you with the brick pattern, but it's not a common bond pattern. So obviously there was a lot of attention to detail for a very, very rural house built in the early 1800s out here with actual black bricks. We call those clinkers. They were the closest in the kiln, spaced out to form patterns, which is very unique. Here's your back L addition, which we believe was an earlier outbuilding that was connected to the house sometime in that last Hare ownership in the 1920s and 30s. So there was exterior siding actually in a lot of the interior walls. So here's the floor plan of the house, just so you can kind of get the gist of the hall and parlor right there. And there's your back addition right there as well. Yeah, here's a picture of the hall area. It did have some updates, we believe, in the 1880s, 1890s, during the Holland widows' children's ownership. But as you see, that a lot of Victorian details that covered up some of the earlier details when the 4/4 windows were added instead of the 6/6. And here's the parlor section with that nice beadboard, which we see throughout Wake County in the late 1800s. So underneath all this is the original 1805 to 1815 finish, which is pretty incredible. It's preserved under all that. This is the second floor room. That's original wallpaper from the 1930s or 40s. It still has the original serial numbers on it. That just was uncovered a couple weeks ago. But this is directly above the hall floor on the second floor. And then this is above the parlor room on the second floor. This wall was added sometime, probably around 1900, but it would have been opened up to that stair hall when you entered into the second floor. But as you see how wide those planks are, it's pretty incredible. I'll give a significant statement for the house. The Norris Holland Hare House is locally significant as a rare and intact example of an early 19th century hall and parlor house. The house retains a high level of exterior integrity of materials, including wood sash windows, plain weatherboards, stone foundation piers, and the Flemish bond brick chimneys. The interior of the dwelling also retains integrity of design, materials, and workmanship with its hall and parlor arrangement with an enclosed stair, reeded trim, hand-planed wall planks, and paneled mantels. Norris Holland Hare House remained in the same family for nearly 2 centuries with strong ties to local families that helped establish the area around Hallman's Crossroads and the Holly Springs vicinity. The Wake County Historic Preservation Commission staff recommendation. Wake County Historic Preservation Commission staff recommends that the Holly Springs Town Council designate Norris Holland Hare House located at 2329 Avon Ferry Road, Holly Springs, as a Holly Springs historic landmark and adopt the associated ordinance. The commission recommendation itself, at its meeting on December 10th, 2019, the Wake County Historic Preservation Commission unanimously recommended that the Holly Springs Town Council designate the Norris Holland Hare House as a Holly Springs historic landmark and adopt the associated ordinance. And that's it from me.
Any questions or comments at this point? I think we've been down this road a little
What
bit.
a great outcome. This is exciting.
Thanks, sir. How about a motion?
Motion to adopt ordinance 19-13 to designate the Norris Holland Hare House as a historic landmark.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded twice. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right. Agenda item 9A, consent agenda. Mayor Pro Tem.
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, it is after the 10 o'clock hour, and appreciate everybody sticking with us, but could we take a quick 5-minute recess for a bio break?
Of course. 5-minute break.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to call the meeting back to order. And I think we're ready for agenda item 10A. Am I correct? Yes, I am. This is new business. Master sign plan 18 MAS 01A02 Lowe's Wegmans Commercial Master sign plan, and this will be Beth Trouts. Hi, Beth.
Hello, good evening, Mayor
Good
and
evening.
Council.
How are you?
I'm Beth Trouts. I'm with the Planning and Zoning Department, and I'm here tonight to have you consider a master sign plan for Lowe's and Wegmans. The requested action is a motion to approve or deny the Resolution 1936 to make and accept the findings of fact for consideration of and to approve Unified Development Ordinance waivers, and a motion to approve or deny or defer Master Sign Plan 18 MAS 01A02 for Lowe's Wegmans Commercial Master Sign Plan with the conditions stated in the packet. You guys are familiar with the site. It is located on the south end of GB Elford Highway, framed out by Ralph Stevens Road to the north and Wildwood Farm Way to the west. Master sign plans are in place to encourage sign design that integrates with and is harmonious to the buildings they occupy. They allow for flexibility in the sign regulations through the use of waivers. Waivers can only be requested and applied to modify the height and width of signs, height of letters or logos, and other modifications that affect sign regulations. Waivers cannot increase the combined sign surface area allowed for the overall site. This master sign plan is asking for 3 ground signs. The first ground sign located along GB Elford Highway, it's a monument sign. The second one is located on Ralph Stevens Road. It is also a monument sign. And the third one is a wall sign located at the intersection of Ralph Stevens and NC 55 Highway. And the applicant is hoping to salvage bricks from one of the buildings being removed from the site and put it into the ground sign along the intersection. In addition, each of the tenants are requesting 3 front wall signs facing Ralph Stevens Road. Lowe's has a main identifier sign and 2 smaller signs. Wegmans is doing the same with a large identifying Wegmans sign and 2 additional signs on the front facade, an additional sign facing Wildwood Farm Way. This is a front sign zone, so they are allowed a sign there as well. I'll go back one slide. About that. Along this back section facing Wildwood subdivision, the applicant is saying that they will not place any signage. With the restriction of no signage on there, they're going to take that square footage and apply for 5 waivers for the front signs and the monument signs. Going through the waivers that they've requested, the first waiver is to increase the external support structure from an allowable 50% to 79%. This area here is your sign surface area, the 2 signs here. Those are allowable by right to be the 80 square feet. And then this is the sign support structure, and they're requesting the waiver to go from 50% to 79%. The second waiver is a waiver to increase the maximum height of the freestanding sign along GB Elford Highway from an allowable 8 feet to 13 feet. They have about 700 linear feet along GB Elford, which would warrant them a sign that is 8 feet in height. In our integrated center, signage is allowed to increase when your linear footage along the road front increases. So the next threshold is at 1,000 linear feet. A sign can go up to 15 feet in height. The third waiver is a request to allow to use 3 distinct areas for calculating sign square footage that are not abutting. So currently our ordinance does not restrict the number of signs you could have on a facade. However, it does not allow the sign surface area to increase over what would typically be allowed. In this case, what happens is they have to draw 3 large rectangles and abut them in order to
calculate the sign surface area. In doing so, they're calculating this white space and counting that as signage as well. What they were asking to do is to draw a tight box around the two smaller signs, so one in front of Wegmans, one around Lowe's, and then each one of them has two separate signs. So instead of counting all of this square footage, which is just white space, they just want to have the three distinct areas that are not abutting. The fourth waiver is a request to increase the maximum sign surface area of a wall sign from an allowable 5% to 6% to accommodate Wegmans sign on the facade facing Ralph Stevens Road. All the other signs presented do meet the square footage requirements of 5% or less. And the last waiver is a request to allow an increase of height from 48 inches to a maximum of 122 for Lowe's and 151 for Wegmans. Wegmans needs it to be that large for the ascender here and the descender on the G in order to make their height. The rest of the Wegmans letters do fall under the 48 inches. Lowe's obviously, to use their standard logo, needs the waiver to increase the height here as well. Planning board recommendation was to approve. It was a 7-0-2 vote. There was no issues and no concerns. If you don't have any questions from me, the applicant is here if you would like to hear.
Do you need the applicant on this?
I just have one question. I think you could probably answer it. At the development plan stage, I can't remember if it was a condition or another commitment somewhere, but we had talked about signs on the back of both of these buildings for the Wildwood folks to make sure there was no light illuminating their neighborhoods. My understanding of the schematics that were submitted in the packet are that there are no signs on the back. I just wanted to confirm that with either you or the team that that's the case.
That is the correct statement. They're going to take the no signage along the back, and they're taking that square footage of the signs and applying it to other signs in the area. The only signs that are illuminated are the ones on the front of the building and then on the side.
Okay.
Is the one, but none facing the subdivision.
Thank you, and thank you guys for doing that.
I was going to bring that.
Any other questions or comments? Ready to go for motion? You want more time?
Motion to approve, adopt resolution 1936 to make and accept the findings of fact for consideration of and to approve unified development ordinance waivers.
Second.
Motion made, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Number two.
Motion to approve master sign plan number 18-MAS-01-A02 for Lowe's Wegmans commercial master sign plan with the conditions as stated in the packet.
Second.
Motion made, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you. Thank you applicants for staying.
Thank you, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Thanks, Sean. Agenda item 10B, new business, development plan 19, DP 14, Holiday Inn Express at Collins Park. And Sean, you kicking this off? Sean Ryan, Planning and Zoning.
Yes. So this agenda item is to consider a development plan for Holiday Inn Express at Collins Park. There'll be two requested actions from the town council tonight, one for a resolution for waivers of UDO sections, and the second motion is for the development plan. Just to orient you to the site, this is located along the south part of G.B. Alford Highway at the intersection of Ralph Stevens Road and G.B. Alford. Just to zoom in, it is part of the Collins Park commercial subdivision. Just to orient you, IHOP is right across the street, and the Aldi, which is under construction, is right adjacent as well. So what is being proposed tonight is for a 61,740 square foot Holiday Inn Express. It'll be 4 stories with 103 rooms. They are providing 109 parking spaces. There is one waiver related to the parking on the site. The applicant is requesting to provide greater than 75% of their parking between the building and the street frontage, which is the area highlighted in yellow on the screen. The landscaping plan does meet all of the town ordinances for landscaping. Perimeter yards are type A open type yards, and it does match the requirements that were approved as part of the Collins Park commercial subdivision. These are the proposed building elevations. The predominant material is brick with some stone accents. All the materials and colors have been selected from the approved Collins Park design guidelines. This is the front elevation, which faces the internal street. This is the side elevation which would face the road directly adjacent to the IHOP. Three of the waivers being requested are related to the architectural requirements. One is to reduce the amount of glazing on the first level of the side that faces the IHOP from 40% to 24%, and on the upper levels from 15% to 5%. The applicant has provided some decorative brick insets along the upper levels to simulate the appearance of windows to make up for some of that reduction. The other two waivers are for the front-facing facade. One is to increase the minimum building bay width from 30 feet to 35 feet 5 inches, and that is at the location of the primary entrance of the building with the stone accents. And the third waiver is to increase the roof line dimension along this portion of the building from 50 feet to 52 feet. With that, I'll invite Rachel Jones up with engineering to talk about the utility and infrastructure requirements for this project.
Okay.
Good evening. So with this development plan, a utility connection will be provided through existing water and sewer infrastructure that has been constructed with the Collins Park Master Plan, as shown on the screen before you. A hydraulic water model report has also been completed with the project, and verification of fire flow and pressure have been verified. In addition to that, a downstream sanitary sewer report update was completed. So with the Collins Park Master Plan, there was an approved sewer study. This project has submitted their anticipated flow and verified that it's within the threshold that has been previously approved. The transportation components that come along with this development plan are tied to the Collins Park Master Plan. There was a TIA completed with the master plan. The applicant has confirmed that they are actually below the threshold that was approved in the TIA and with the build-out of 2020. So this is an overview of the area. Just to give you some context, the blue highlighted area is the Collins Park Master Plan, and as Sean had on his previous slide, the Holiday Inn Express will be located in this area. Collins Park is out there today constructing road improvements across their frontage on Ralph Stevens Road. The sidewalk is in, curb and gutter is in, and they are working on completing those additional laneage improvements. In addition to that, they're constructing a right turn lane southbound on the bypass onto Ralph Stevens Road. All of these infrastructure-related items must be complete prior to the Holiday Inn Express receiving construction drawing approval. And if there are any questions for engineering, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Is the sewer on this Bass Lake or Basil Creek?
This is Bass Lake.
And their update report, did it indicate any sort of issues with that impact or any other general, back to my questions on the other project? Is there any indication in their report about that?
All right, there's expected to be a fee paid toward additional impact for the downstream sewer infrastructure. It was not significant in the way that they submitted the letter, they evaluated what was previously approved. They're within that threshold, but we're teetering on the maximum amount that was allocated for the master plan. So we're continuing to monitor that, but there's no additional improvements anticipated.
Okay.
In terms of parking and looking at the ratio of rooms, it makes sense. Do they also have any conference rooms or expecting to have conference facilities to have a different flow of people coming in during the day along with rooms?
So they are anticipating, they are providing some additional parking for that conference space. It's a very small conference room. We can bring the applicant up to say how much. I believe it's around 800 square feet. So not only are they providing parking for the rooms, but they've provided additional parking to supply that conference room. How they're going to use it and rent it, I think I would let the applicant state that.
Any other questions at this point?
How many lots or parcels, subdivided parcels do they have at Collins Park? Do you know offhand?
There's Aldi, this will be a new lot, and then there's 2 vacant lots. They have a maximum of 8 lots that they can go up to,
Okay.
so they're at 4. If this were to be approved, they'd be at 4.
Okay, so they're subdividing for this and then 2 separate lots.
two
Two
separate
other
lots
ones
remain.
that are
yes.
undeveloped.
Correct.
Okay.
Chris, any additional conversation from the planning board? 7:02. Yeah, come on. You've been kind enough to wait. I thought I'd get you up there.
The only thinking thing was really, mine was the parking. And the parking is that they're lowering the parking. They have, there's like, I can't remember the exact number, but I'll make this up. 7 to 8 rooms and like 75 parking spaces. And I was asking, and they said they would have parking spaces in the adjacent lot. And there was a comment that we made, we wanted to say for the council to recommend that there's ample enough parking, because we didn't want to set a precedence that you can park in someone else's parking lot. Because there's a car place that's there, something else there. It's not their responsibility.
Firestone.
Yes, a Firestone there. And it's not Firestone's responsibility for parking. That was the discussion at the very end of that, but that was it.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Anything else? Thanks, sir.
All right, thanks, guys. Any additional questions for staff before the applicant can come up?
Don't think so. We good so far? Do you want to talk to the applicant?
I'm all right.
I've already talked to him once about the parking 3 weeks ago, so.
Okay. Is the applicant here? Would you like to at least introduce yourself? I'm not sure we got any questions for you, but come on anyway. Since you've been waiting.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Mike Stewart. I'm with Stewart and Proctor Engineering and Surveying. I reside at 4716 Carrollton Drive in Raleigh, North Carolina, in the Swift Creek area. I asked Mr. Barry Eagle, President and CDO of the Crown Travel Management Group, to address concerns about the parking, and he has written me a nice letter to read here. It says, in reference to adequate parking spaces, the 109 spaces for our 103 rooms proposed by the Holiday Inn Express meets our needs, but it also meets the specifications for the brand. To give the council some perspective, we have a 105-room Holiday Inn Express in Leland with 109 spaces. We have a 98-room Hampton Inn in Swansboro with 105 spaces. That our market mix of travelers is very even between business and leisure, and at both properties, along with a healthy mix of meetings and weekend events, we've never encountered any concerns. In addition, we're finding that our guests are utilizing Uber and Lyft for their transportation more often in our larger markets, which opens up additional parking. We also do a lot of crew business during the week, where 4 to 5 individuals will arrive together in one work truck. He says, I assure you that if we believe we needed more parking, we would kindly ask the planning board for additional spaces.
Questions or comments? We're good. Thank you for staying. Thank you for coming. Anything else, Sean?
No, that's all.
All set? There are 2 motions. Who wants to attack?
Go ahead, you got it. Motion to adopt resolution number 19-37 to make and accept the findings of fact for consideration of and to approve unified development ordinance waivers.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Number 2.
Motion to approve development plan number 19-BP-14 for Holiday Inn Express with the conditions stated below.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Agenda item 10C, new business. Development Plan 19-DP-16, 113 Holly Springs Road Office Building Conversion. And it would be Melissa Sigmund again. Planning and zoning.
Thank you. So this item is a request to review a development plan and associated waiver for preservation of a historic structure. The requested actions would be to make and accept the findings of fact for the waiver, and to approve or deny or defer the development plan for these changes. The property is located along Holly Springs Road, slightly to the east of Main Street. This request is for an existing building. It was an existing home to be converted from a residence into an office structure and have changes to the site development as a result. They are asking for the waiver because they will be preserving the structure for some of the site features. So this is the existing house. It is a historically surveyed property constructed about 1914. It does retain its historic integrity and has been surveyed by Capital Area Preservation. It will maintain its historic character with the applicant's changes. The UDO does allow for these waivers. The applicant in this case is requesting the waiver from the hard surface parking requirement so that some of their parking does not have to be hard surfaced, and also an exemption from the exterior facade requirements so that they can maintain the look of the building and essentially keep the existing siding and not try to use brand new building materials that would not match the building. As you can see on the site plan, they will be adding parking, both hard surface as well as gravel, adding a driveway, adding trash enclosure. Those are the main features of the site that will be added. One item for note, there is a large tree that is being requested to be removed. The tree is quite close to the existing building, and it has been found to be damaging the foundation. With this site plan request, part and parcel with this request, council, you would be approving the removal of this tree, given its understanding that it is currently damaging this historic structure. They've also provided a landscape plan meeting all of the requirements, including the buffers along the edges, as well as foundation plantings. You can see these images show the existing condition of the house. The proposed elevations primarily keep that, with a few minor changes to the metal standing seam roof at the bay window, the addition of a ramp, as well as new roof shingles. The rest of the material will be kept or repaired. The siding will be repaired or replaced as needed, but keeping the building intact. They have, the applicant has signed a rehabilitation agreement with Capital Area Preservation to keep the house meeting those standards for the integrity. If you've got any questions for engineering, we have Rachel available.
Questions? We're good for engineering.
And with that, we do have our planning board recommendation. It was 9-0. We had a couple questions, if you'd like.
Further comments? 9-0? Got it. All right, thank you, Chris.
And the applicant is here, if you'd like to hear from them.
Would you like to hear from the applicant?
Still here.
Are we good?
We're still here in the back, yeah.
Shall we?
I don't
We're
know that
giving
they
you
had
the
statement
option.
prepared, but I'm sure they're here for if you have any questions of their.
All right. Just name and address, please. I'm sure we got any questions for you, but we'd like to meet you anyway.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Town Council, and all the audience. I'm Harm Sandar at 320 Flat Rock Lane, Holly Springs, North Carolina.
Any questions of the applicant?
I just want to applaud you for saving this house. I've been walking by it for a while and been worried about it.
Good point.
This is great to see that we're saving this house.
Sure, yeah, that's the intent.
Yeah. And I saw comments, you're looking for maybe one business in there instead of having a lot of folks. So that's why the parking
That's correct.
is
Yeah,
proportional.
because of the access to the second floor, we don't have ADA, so it will be just one business.
Okay. I don't know.
I think we're good? We're good. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
We have two motions. Motion number one,
That's long one.
as read on the screen.
Motion to approve 19-WAV-29, request to allow for a waiver of regulations of UDO Section 1.23, request for incentives for the preservation, rehabilitation, or adaptive reuse of historic structures for petition number 19 DP-16 for Holly Springs Road Office to allow an exemption of hard surface off-street parking requirement and exemption of exterior building facade modifications from the building material colors, textures, architecture, roof treatment, and facade modulation requirements, and additions as submitted by Thompson Associates, dated revised 10/11/2019.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Number two.
Motion to approve Development Plan 19-DP16 for Holly Springs Road Office as submitted by Thompson and Associates, dated revised 10/11/2019 with the following condition. if site lighting is added, a point-by-point photometric plan in conformance with lighting levels specified in UDO section 7.02 shall be submitted to and approved by the Department of Planning and Zoning.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. Agenda item 10D, new business, Parks, Recreation, and Greenways Master Plan Update Contract Approval. General Leanne Plummer, Parks and Recreation. Sorry, I had to do it.
Good morning, or good morning. It's almost
Jen,
morning,
almost.
right?
Getting close.
Good evening.
Getting close.
Good evening, Mayor
Tell
and
us how you really
Council.
feel. How long
I,
is
I
this
know it's late,
presentation?
but we're excited to bring this action item before you today. We are asking you to consider awarding the professional services contract for the Parks, Recreation, and Greenways Master Plan. There were two requested actions. One includes awarding the contract amount to McAdams in the amount of $162,940. And the second would be a motion to approve the budget amendment, transferring that amount from the Parks and Recreation reserves to the general fund contract services for the purpose of this contract. So as outlined in the strategic plan, as well as approved in the fiscal year 20 budget, Parks and Recreation is planning to embark on an update to the Beyond the Green master plan. So this original master plan was done in 2007, so quite a few years ago, before significant growth of the town. Many of the projects have been complete and many have not been, and so this new update to a master plan will really set the course of action for the foreseeable future. So why do towns actually do park master plans? Certainly it creates a framework for orderly and consistent planning. We want to make sure that we have proactive efforts moving forward with the great growth and development that is occurring. It also identifies needs and strategies for the acquisition, development, and administration of our parks and facilities. It's also a foundation for the understanding and responding, as I mentioned, to the continued growth, particularly in some specific areas of the town. It also helps us develop a strategic action plan, really defining our priorities with our Parks and Recreation system. And lastly, we create a budget for phased-in development and improvement so that we understand this is going to take time in order to move forward to meet these goals and objectives. Lastly, I just want to point out, we have been strategic in renaming the update to this plan. It's Parks, Recreation, and Greenways Master Plan to really emphasize on the need to focus on the greenway component. So just to tell you a little bit about the selection process, the town did go out for a formal request for proposal, or RFP. 5 bids were received. There was a very multidisciplinary selection team consisting of representatives from the manager's office, the planning department, engineering, Parks Recreation, and also a representative from the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. We did interview the top 3 firms. Specifically during the interviews, we were looking for direct experience in Parks and Recreation planning. Again, a focus on skill set relating to greenway analysis and design. We also talked through the importance of a strong community engagement program, and finally really having a clear understanding about the financial and revenue strategies through some of the recommendations through the plan. With that, the team did select McAdams as the lead firm through this process. In particular, there were several highlights of this leadership that we particularly focused on. So Rachel Cotter would be the project manager. She is a registered landscape architect with over 15 years experience. She most recently worked on Parks and Recreation master plans in Garner, Morrisville, and also Chatham County. Also significant to note is Iona Thomas. She is the principal in charge of this public sector division with McAdams. She will be in charge of our greenway analysis and design. She worked and was the lead designer behind the Wake County Greenway Master Plan, as well as the Town of Cary's Greenway Master Plan update. So again, really knowledgeable about the greenway connections in the area, and I just think a real asset to the overall team. Notwithstanding, I do want to share the sub-consultants, because that was also something that we took into consideration when we were evaluating the firms. Pros Consulting is a national Parks and Recreation leader. Leon Younger is the owner and CEO. He has over 30 years in Parks and Recreation management experience, and really will bring a lot of insight into programs, operational and maintenance review, budget and financial analysis, as well as funding strategy. So excited to have him also part of a sub-consulting team. ETC Institute would be responsible for the statistically valid survey that would be administered. They have conducted over 300 local government surveys. And lastly, HH Architecture would be responsible for analysis of existing and future facilities. Just to kind of share a little bit about the project schedule and sort of the process. So the anticipated time frame is between 12 and 14 months. My hope is that we can actually complete it in a year time frame. And really it's 4 phases. So the first half is really digging deep into the assessment side, certainly involving a kickoff meeting and looking at where we are today, making sure that there's significant review of our existing planning documents, kind of understanding the community's needs through the survey as well as through the community engagement portions, looking at where we are financially, and then creating some benchmarks. The second is the vision component. Again, looking at department and town goals overall and objectives of what we're trying to achieve. Develop a level of service. What are we trying to deliver to our citizens, and at what service level? Certainly, again, additional stakeholder meetings for targeted groups, and also identifying our park classifications. The third section moves into the recommendation area, and this really drills down a little bit more into specific action items, if you will, and developing financial strategies and operations and maintenance in order to move the plan forward. Certainly, lastly, there will be an action implementation plan that will be presented, and that will, again, prioritize the recommendations that are outlined in the plan, including a budget for a 10-year planning horizon. At that point, we would come back for final council adoption. Certainly, throughout the plan, there will be various, again, stakeholder meetings, public engagement opportunities, council interviews. There'll be a lot of involvement with the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee as well. There are 3 meetings specifically identified to engage them at a high level. So that is a quick overview in a nutshell. Again, this is a long-awaited plan. We're very excited to be able to move forward and plan to kick off in January of 2020. And I'm open for any questions.
Questions or comments?
I had just asked Leanne yesterday if there was any possibility of much like we did with the future land use plan, of having a community action group,
Right, yeah.
that we actually select a resident from each major, residential area around that's going to be connecting to these greenways, so they can participate in some of that roundtable discussion along with the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee.
Make sense? Yeah, we talked about that.
That makes sense.
Make sense? Mm-hmm. I think we can do that. Yeah. Can we do that? Absolutely. We'll do that. We'll work on that.
Okay. We'll work on it. Yeah, we can include them as part of one of our stakeholder groups.
Terrific.
Yeah,
Yep,
that'd be great.
absolutely.
Anything else for her?
Just so last night I had the opportunity to speak with Mayor Colley in Mooresville at the dinner about his experience with McAdams, and he had nothing but glowing things to say, especially on the community engagement front. He said they did an exceptional job of reaching out, reading through the plan. The traveling trunk shows to the underserved communities I thought was really awesome and innovative, so I'm all for it.
Good enough.
One of my proudest accomplishments in the first 2 years of my term has been instituting a 5-year rolling plan for updating all of our plans around town. We've just gotten through the first part of that with the future land use and community character update. This is part 2, Parks, Recreation, and Greenways. Engineering is up next with phase 3, I think, for CPP. So really glad to see this, and we've, in support of our strategic initiatives and what we're trying to do as a group, we've got to get these plans from 2008 updated and, really in line with where we're going as a community and supporting the growth for both our vision and what the development community is dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So with that, I'm happy to make the motion to award a contract to McAdams in the amount of $162,940 for professional services to update the Parks, Recreation, Greenways Master Plan, Section 3 of the Town Comprehensive Plan.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Number 2.
Motion to approve budget amendment transferring $162,940 from Parks and Recreation Reserves to General Fund Contract Services, account 10-425-27, 12.05.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed again unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Leanne. Agenda item 10E, new business. Land donation of 7-acre tract by LaRue M. Powell, Rex Road tract. I think this is the counselor.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. It's not often I get to give you good news, but
We're ready.
Landowner that owns a good bit of land in southern Wake County has seen fit to express her gratitude to the town of Holly Springs, particularly the public safety sector and the fire department and the police department by offering a 7-acre tract on Rex Road. I think you're familiar with it. I don't know if we're going to put this on the map. Let me advance.
Do you have a plot on it? I don't think so.
Sorry, I don't.
Here, wait a minute.
So the little dot there, the little red area in the southwest corner of town, and
There
here's
you go.
zoom in. And the town really has no express purpose for this right now, but I know the fire department is vying for some use of it, but we're going to have to, because it wasn't something and the town manager could speak more to this. It wasn't something that we're looking for, but the landowner and her representative do want to recognize Gerald Atkins for his involvement in this transaction. He was helpful, and this particular agenda item might be a good bookend to the first one with the police department. So you've got the police department getting great accolades. And then we're going to cap off tonight's evening with the fire department getting their well-deserved recognition for their community, their value in the community. So with that, we just look for a motion to accept, unless you'd like to hear from Ms. Powell. I think tonight.
Would you like to speak?
Oh, sorry.
Anybody got any questions or comments? If not, let's do it.
And then it would just be a motion to accept the land donation.
7-acre tract, yeah, on Rex Road.
Motion to accept the land donation.
Second.
Second.
There it is. Motion made, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you
Thank
for
you so
waiting
much.
around.
That's great.
Very generous.
Thank you.
Now we will go into other business. Give me a second here. And as far as I'm concerned, I will continue always to do the crosswalk safety. And by the way, I think we have reached that pinnacle today across the street. The crosswalk safety lights are coming on. They look beautiful. They're on, I think this evening. And I appreciate that. Because of the time, I will stop and pass this along to anyone else who wants to speak. Or not.
Very quickly, I just want to thank all the residents for working with us this year. We've accomplished a lot as we go into the holiday season. Hanukkah starts on Sunday, on the 22nd. We have Kwanzaa that starts on the 26th. We have Christmas on the 25th. So hope everyone enjoys a great holiday. And thank you for supporting our staff and supporting us as well as Council of Parkdale. Thank you.
Well,
Just a thank you to Tamara, Cassie, Mark, even saw Daniel Weeks out there in a red vest. Everybody that I forgot on the town staff. I'm sure everybody had a hand in our Happy Holidays parade. This past weekend was fantastic. So great job to everybody that had a hand in that. Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas to all of our staff members as well. This is our last meeting of 2019, so we'll see you all in 2020.
and Daniel, thank you for helping me off the ladder. I mean, off the trailer, on the ladder. I know, you, anybody else?
Quick thanks to Randy and the staff to help show me around some of the town facilities this week, as well as continue to immerse into the town. But what I would ask is, it's this time of year for a lot of us during the holidays. It's a happy season for a lot of folks. They're actually alone during the holidays, so please keep those folks in your mind. And if you have an opportunity to help some of them out or invite them into your homes that may spend the holidays alone, that's a great thing to do. And on top of that, please remember all those who are serving us deployed. So service members who are over deployed away from their families during the holiday season. So please keep them in your thoughts as you go through your festivities. And Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to everyone.
So I'm looking forward to my tour on Friday. So I get to see all the same things. I'd like to just point out that it was a busy week in business last week. The mayor and I attended the economic forecast for Apex, Holly Springs, and Fuquay. Irena did a wonderful job of representing our town. I don't think she's still here. And then the next night we had the business appreciation event. So we had some economic recruiters in, but also our small business community, members of all three of the cohorts from Launch Holly Springs. What a great group they are. And with them, with Bill and Irena and Anna, we are in good hands moving forward.
And it's not all state. That's a good hand. Anybody else? We're all good. Managers report.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. I do have a handful of items, but I'll work through them quickly. First off, just to add to a couple of comments around, we had a lot of great events. We have had a lot of great events throughout December, and I want to thank the community and our staff for doing many of these, and some of them were already mentioned, but I wanted to add the Sensory Santa event, which is really a direct relation to your strategic plan, guiding us to reach out more in the community for ways that we can reach citizens and residents who might be underserved. And this was a great opportunity for kids who may have sensory sensitivity, and we've got a lot of great feedback on that. So I want to recognize Rachel Downing, Leanne Plummer, and the entire Parks and Rec staff there. We also had the tree lighting, of course, and the parade, and Parks and Rec, again, very heavily involved with that, and police. And I also want to recognize Tamara Warren. I think Tamara might be.
She's there.
And maybe at a next meeting we can do something a little bit more to recognize these efforts. But I do want to recognize Tamara, and just did an amazing job organizing the parade. I got so many fantastic pieces of feedback on that. So thank you, Tamara. And the police department, a really big effort to pull that off, and it went off without a hitch. So, and also I think with that, thanking Tim Congleton, completed 25 years of emceeing, and we will have an opportunity to bring him back as well. And then Don Schwiniger, who will be taking over here in the
Big weather.
Yeah, big weather. So and then also the fire department, they had a Cookies with Santa as well. So a busy time. I just want to recognize staff, because it takes a lot of effort and work, and these staff members out here and others who aren't here really pulled it off. The last item tonight is one that I am extremely proud of, and it's a hard award to receive. There are only approximately 1,600 cities and counties in the entire nation who received this award, and that is the Government Finance Officers Association Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. And so I want to have Corey and Mary just wave, and a couple still in the audience. Thank you for staying. This is a really important award because it recognizes best practices in financial management and budget planning, and there's really 4 components that you're evaluated on. One is how well does your budget document and your budget presentation material, how the standard as a communications device, that's one. 2, how well does it portray and convey your financial plan and your budget plan. 3, it's an operations guide in terms of explaining what is it that our town, our local government does. And then 4, its our ability to convey policies that the council, mayor and council have for guiding the organization, particularly from a financial perspective, but broader as well in terms of your other policies. So it's a really fantastic award. I think we get a plaque, we get a couple other things. And this is our first time receiving it, hopefully the first of many. And I do want to recognize again Corey Peterson in particular, with his great work, just doing really a bang-up job getting that document and all of our materials ready. So thank you very much, Corey. Great job. Congratulations. With that, Mayor and Council, that's the last time I have.
Counselor?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor and Council. I have 4 things to discuss with you. One is a land acquisition matter pursuant to 143.3 and 11A5 concerning the Wright property land acquisition matter. Secondly, pursuant to A3 of that subsection, under the attorney-client privilege, to discuss matter involving the Curran litigation, which is the class action lawsuit for the impact fees. One for Don Davis litigation, an update on that, and one potential litigation issue with the Cornball sewer.
So moved, Counselor.
Your second? All in favor?
Aye.
Closed session. Merry Christmas to all, and to all a short night.